Hey guys, tonight, we're stepping into a world where the streets are dark, the windows are shuttered, and the only thing between you and complete oversleeping chaos is the voice of a stranger singing your hours into the night. Yes, before alarm. Clocks? Before that shrill ringtone you keep snoozing 8 times, cities depended on human voices to keep time. Imagine wandering an Ottoman city in the small hours of the morning. Cold stone under your feet, lanterns flickering, the smell of bread not yet baked, coffee not yet brewed, and the unsettling realization that if nobody sings, you probably wouldn't survive here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love for you to comment where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now, because I'm curious if you're closer to dawn or midnight at this moment. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is cool, thinner than the heat of day that will come later, and it carries the smell of damp wood, horse sweat, and the faint sweetness of roses climbing walls in the courtyards. You walk down streets that feel more like veins in a sleeping body than open spaces, narrow, stone-walled, echoing with the shuffle of your sandals. You notice how every sound feels amplified, the scrape of leather, the whisper of fabric, the distant drip of water from a rooftop. And then, cutting across the quiet, a voice, low, measured, steady, a human voice singing the hours. It isn't quite like music you'd put on Spotify. It's rough, carried by the chest, a little nasal, a little ragged, but alive with rhythm. It bends notes like the call to prayer, floats between chant and melody, and you realize it's not designed for art, it's functional. It's the city's way of saying, hey, time is moving, get up, don't miss what matters. You lean against a wall, rough and cold, and let the sound drift past you like a tide. You remember that in the 16th century, when Suleiman the Magnificent reigned, the empire stretched from Budapest to Baghdad, and yet in this vast machinery of power, individual streets still depended on these anonymous men. Watchmen, guardians, timekeepers. You imagine their figures, a simple cloak, a staff, maybe a lantern, and a voice that stitched households to the clock of heaven. It's oddly comforting, like your phone alarm but with more humanity, and less chance of you rage smashing it into silence. The watchman's voice slides into a phrase you recognize. It's part prayer, part instruction, reminding households to prepare for the early prayer. Behind wooden shutters, you picture families shifting under quilts, groaning the same way you do when you're told to get up at 5 a.m. Only, there's no snooze button here, unless you want the baker to glare at you later for showing up too late. For bread, a cat slinks past you, tail high, eyes glinting with lantern light. The watchman greets it under his breath, half joking, half lonely, and you hear the staff tap against stone like punctuation to his song. It's easy to forget how dark the pre-electric world really was. Without lamps or neon, these alleys are caves. The song is a rope pulling you through. There's something both ordinary and remarkable about this system. You know about major Ottoman events. The Siege of Vienna in 1529, for example, where armies marched across Europe. Yet here in the silence before dawn, what mattered most was a man with a voice, making sure his neighbors didn't sleep through their responsibilities. Historians still debate whether these men were more like municipal employees, religious, helpers, or simply tolerated freelancers. Maybe they were a little of all three, filling gaps in a city that never fully slept. The unusual fact is that some of these watchmen didn't just sing the hours. They improvised poems, local gossip, even weather predictions. Imagine your alarm clock pausing halfway through to tell you, by the way, Yusuf owes Ibrahim 2 loaves of bread, and tomorrow will probably rain. You'd wake up whether you wanted to or not, mostly out of curiosity. You step around a puddle, the cold water reflecting a slice of moon. The air hums with stillness, and every house feels like it's holding its breath. You catch the smell of yeast, faint and promising, leaking from a bakery already stirring to life. That smell alone could wake the dead, or at least drag you, half-conscious, toward the promise of fresh bread. The voice continues. This time you sense fatigue in it. Imagine singing the hours every night, rain or shine, cold or heat, for neighbors who rarely thank you. You hear the cough between phrases. The way the voice dips too low and then claws back up to pitch. Still, he carries on. You realize his song isn't just about waking others. It's a ritual, a rhythm that keeps him awake too, one voice warding off the silence. You pause to look up. The sky is a deep indigo, stars beginning to blur as the faintest smear of light gathers at the horizon. Birds stir, sparrows, crows, the occasional owl returning home. The watchman's voice becomes one of many signals that the night is about to surrender. In this hour you feel balanced between worlds. Night that wants to cling, day that insists on breaking in. There's a quiet humor in imagining these men as the original playlist curators. You didn't get lo-fi beats to chill to, but you got rhythmic chants bouncing between stone walls. And unlike your headphones, the whole neighborhood had to listen. If you didn't like the watchman's voice, tough luck. You were basically stuck with the same track every night for years. Still, there's dignity in it. You sense how his presence reassures households. Fires won't rage unchecked. Thieves think twice. Time doesn't slip unnoticed. He is part of the city's immune system, unseen but vital. You imagine the weight of a lantern in his hand, the warmth fading as oil burns low, the tired ache in his feet. You wonder if he dreams of applause, or if the murmured thanks of a baker. Or a nod from an imam is enough to keep him going. Your steps carry you past a fountain, dry at this hour, marble slick with dew. You hear him pause, take a sip from a water skin, clear his throat and start again. You can almost feel the ripple of irritation in some houses, those who wanted just 10 more minutes. But no mercy comes. The song resumes, and the city responds, like a sleeper rolling over. There's a strange peace in walking here, guided by his voice. You realize that every great empire, no matter how vast, runs on the small labor of overlooked people. Empires conquer cities, rewrite borders, topple dynasties, but the rhythm of daily life. It depends on someone trudging through the night, singing half poems, tapping a stick, keeping you from oversleeping your bread and prayers. And as the voice drifts further down the alley, you find yourself moving too, carried not by urgency, but by curiosity. What else lies ahead in the still hours, just before the city fully wakes? Your eyes follow the glow of his lantern vanishing into the next bend, your ears straining to catch the last note before silence folds back in. The air shifts, slightly cooler, as if the night itself takes a breath, and you step softly, ready to follow the watchman deeper into the maze of streets. You follow the lantern's faint sway deeper into the labyrinth of streets. The air has grown just a touch colder, enough to make your breath curl in thin, ghostly wisps. Every stone you step on seems to answer back, echoing softly, as if reluctant, to disturb the night. The voice continues ahead of you, steady as a pendulum, a little cracked with fatigue but carrying the same purpose, telling the hour, reminding the city that time itself is awake, even if its people would rather stay dreaming. When you finally catch up, you see him more clearly. The watchman, cloak wrapped tight around shoulders, staff in hand, lantern glowing against his cheekbones, he looks less like a man and more like a silhouette sketched by the firelight of the streets. His eyes, though heavy, dart quickly. He notices everything, from a shutter that rattles too loudly to the shadow of a cat darting across his path. He is not only singing, he is guarding. You feel as though you've stepped into the orbit of someone who is both utterly ordinary and strangely vital. A man invisible by day, but holding the threads of night together. He pauses beneath a balcony. You hear the creak of floorboards above, then a faint voice sharp with sleep. Is it already time? The watchman tips his head back and answers in the same melodic cadence, but with a chuckle woven in. It is always time, my friend. Whether you wake or not is another matter. A muffled groan comes from behind the shutters, followed by the thump of someone rolling over in bed. You can't help but grin. It's the 16th century equivalent of you swiping at your phone alarm and muttering, "Just 5 more minutes." The ai. Song resumes, measured and rhythmic, each phrase punctuated by a staff tap against the ground. The sound is oddly hypnotic, like a metronome for a city's heartbeat. You let yourself drift with it, noticing how the rhythm fills the emptiness between buildings. Without it, the silence would feel overwhelming, maybe even frightening. You Realize this man isn't just a singer of ours, he is a keeper of courage. He slows at a corner where two streets meet, one wider than the other. A donkey tied outside a shuttered shop flicks its ears, restless, as though sensing the approaching dawn. The watchman strokes its neck briefly, murmuring something too soft to catch, then moves on. You catch the faint smell of straw and manure, mixing with the cold damp of the paving stones. Not glamorous, but grounding. It's a reminder that life here is always messy, never as polished as the paintings and stories suggest. As you walk, your mind drifts to larger currents of history. You recall that in 1453, just a few decades before, Mehmed II had taken Constantinople, turning Byzantium's capital into Istanbul, the beating heart of this empire. That conquest shook the world, and even now its echoes reverberate in the stones under your feet. Yet on this night, the great drama of empires is dwarfed by the smaller drama of a single man, walking, singing, keeping time alive. He halts suddenly. His eyes flick upward to a small window where a child peeks out. You catch the glint of candlelight on wide, curious eyes. The watchman lowers his voice, softening it into almost a lullaby. "Little one, go back to sleep. The morning will come." Soon enough, the child whispers, "Sing again." And for a few measures, he does, gentle, soothing, more melody than announcement. The shutters close slowly, the light behind them dimming. You realize you've just witnessed the most tender, a version of an alarm clock in history, a stranger singing a child back to dreams. The watchman exhales heavily and resumes his walk. His staff clicks against uneven cobblestones, and you notice how he seems to count steps between each sung line, as though timing himself against the very rhythm of his city. You wonder if the consistency of his pace is the secret that keeps his voice so steady. After all, you try singing while walking uphill sometime. It's not pretty. You ask yourself quietly, who decides what hour it is? Without glowing digital numbers, without even pocket watches for most, how does he know? You glance at his belt, half expecting a hidden sundial, though to be fair, the moon wouldn't be very cooperative. Instead, you notice a small sand-filled hourglass tucked into a pouch. Rare, fragile, but there. The grains slip like whispers marking his cues. It strikes you as remarkable that the pulse of a whole district could rest on something as delicate as a pocket of glass and sand. The unusual fact, whispered among locals, is that some watchmen weren't entirely sober while doing their rounds. A sip of raka here, a swig of wine there. Liquid courage to chase away the chill and the loneliness. One can only imagine how those songs sounded after a few too many. Probably a mix between heartfelt folk ballad and what your uncle does at karaoke after 3 beers. Yet somehow it still worked. People woke up and life went on. You follow as he crosses into a wider street. The paving stones here are smoother, polished by centuries of footsteps. Above, balconies overhang like leaning shoulders, dripping dew onto your cloak. Somewhere ahead, you hear the faint crash of waves against the shore. The Bosphorus is not far, and even here, inland, its presence hums through the air like a constant drum. Another window creaks open. A woman's voice calls softly, "Watchman, is it almost prayer?" He tips his head, sings the time, then adds with a grin, "You are early, Hunnam, you have time yet to dream another dream." You hear her laugh, warm but weary, before the window shutters again. This tiny exchange feels timeless, like the neighborhood's own private radio show. And suddenly, your mind jumps to modern life. Think of how often you check your phone just to know what time it is. Imagine instead relying on a man outside your window singing it at you. No screen glow, no scrolling, just a human reminder. It's strangely enviable, almost intimate, though you can also imagine the Yelp reviews. Great singer, but 2 stars, because he woke me too early. The watchman pauses by a fountain where water trickles endlessly. He sets his lantern down, cups his hands, and drinks. You hear the water echo in the stone basin, crisp and metallic, and you feel your own throat tighten with thirst. He sighs, tilts his head back, then mutters, "Cold tonight." His voice is half directed at you, half to himself. You answer softly, "Yes, colder than I expected." For a moment, he looks at you, surprised, as though not many speak back. During his rounds, he smiles faintly, then hoists the lantern again. Cold keeps me honest. Warm nights I might fall asleep. You chuckle, and then the whole city would oversleep? Exactly, he says, eyes twinkling. And then I'd never hear the end of it. You notice as he walks that his posture is straighter than you'd expect from someone weary. There is pride in his step, a quiet sense of being needed. He is not just filling empty hours, he is binding the fabric of the neighborhood, thread by sung thread. Without him, perhaps the mornings would come, unraveled, prayers missed, ovens late, the rhythm of life disrupted. He is, in a sense, the Empire's smallest gear, and yet without the small gears, the great clock never runs. Historians still debate whether these watchmen were officially appointed or simply tolerated volunteers. Some records suggest they received small payments from households. A few coins slipped discreetly once in a while. Others claim they were connected to the mosque, semi-religious roles bound by community trust. The ambiguity almost makes them more fascinating. Men both official and unofficial, guardians who were at once everywhere and nowhere. You trail him down a narrow slope where the smell of damp stone is sharp in your nose. Somewhere nearby, bread is baking now. The yeast has bloomed, and the scent is irresistible, rich and warm against the cold air. It pulls you forward like a string. The watchman inhales deeply, chuckles to himself, and murmurs, "The bakers are always first, even before me." It is in that moment you understand. Though he sings the hours, he doesn't control them. He simply reflects them back, like the moon mirrors the sun. He is the keeper, not the maker, of time. A man trusted with reminding others that their lives are woven into a larger rhythm, even if they'd rather hide under quilts. The voice rises again, softer now, but still certain. You follow, lantern glow bobbing ahead of you, and the streets begin to curve toward the heart of the neighborhood. There is a sense of expectation here, as though the stones themselves are bracing for the day. Somewhere far off, a rooster crows. You feel the city stir, caught between dark and light, silence and sound. And as the watchman turns another corner, his staff clicking like a drumbeat, you realize that while he keeps the time, something else, something larger, keeps him. Perhaps faith, perhaps duty, perhaps just habit. Whatever it is, it pushes him forward, note after note, hour after hour. And you follow, ready to hear what new echoes await in the streets ahead. The watchman leads you further along, and suddenly you notice how the street itself changes character. Gone are the wide, echoing stretches. Here, the houses crouch closer, leaning in, as if sharing secrets above your head. Wooden doors line the narrow path, some tall and proud, others short and sagging, but all marked with scratches, nails, and the faded memory of hands pushing them open. Their surfaces glisten faintly from the night's dampness, as if the grain of the wood is alive, breathing under the lantern light. You realize that every door is more than just an entrance. It's a story, a mystery, a stage curtain hiding entire worlds. The smell shifts, too. Resin from old beams mingles with the faint sweetness of rosewater, which someone has poured earlier that evening to freshen the threshold. You catch the sour bite of vinegar from a pickle jar forgotten outside, and further along, the nutty warmth of sesame seeds roasting in a pan. The air here is a patchwork quilt of flavors and lives stitched together. If you ever wondered what an empire smells like at 3:45 a.m., well, it's this oddly specific cocktail. The watchman taps his staff against the stone, the sound bouncing. From door to door, like a neighbor politely clearing his throat to remind you he's still there. His song comes softer now, less proclamation and more companionable hum, as though the street itself doesn't need to be shouted awake. You glance up and see shutters with faint candle glow behind them. Some families stir, others remain tucked into the rhythms of sleep. The wooden doors act like lungs, inhaling and exhaling whispers of life from inside. At one door, carved with an intricate pattern of stars, a man peers out suddenly. His beard is tangled, his eyes heavy with sleep, but his voice carries irritation. "Why so early tonight?" The watchman chuckles, swinging his lantern slightly. "Not early, Arby. Time is what it is. Maybe your dreams ran late." The man snorts, mutters something about bakers clanging too soon, and shuts the door with a thump. You imagine him crawling back to bed, grumbling like someone woken by their neighbor mowing the lawn at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Some complaints, it seems, are timeless. Your hand brushes one of the doors as you pass. It's rough, splintered in places, cool from the night air. A nail sticks out dangerously, and you pull your sleeve back quickly, realizing that tetanus shots were not exactly part of Ottoman healthcare. The irony strikes you. These doors may look charming to your modern eyes, but for the families inside, they were practical shields, thin defenses against thieves, gossipers, or the endless draft of cold air slipping through alleys. The Watchman slows at one particularly grand door. The wood is dark, almost black, and reinforced with iron studs. He glances at it with a kind of respect, then murmurs to you, "The Pasha lives here." You lean closer and hear faint murmurs of servants, inside already awake, preparing for the day. In your mind, you recall a famous event, the Siege of Vienna in 1529, when Suleiman's armies reached the very gates of Europe, nearly rewriting the continent's fate. The thought hits you. The same empire that thundered toward Vienna also relied on little streets like this, with sleepy households and watchmen humming hours into the night. The scale of history shrinks and expands with every breath you take. Further along, another door catches your eye. It's crooked, patched with lighter wood, as if repaired many times. The watchman grins knowingly. That's Yusuf's place. He has 10 children. Doors don't last long when you have 10 children. As if summoned by his words, you hear a muffled giggle from inside, followed by a child's whisper. "Sing louder." The watchman obliges, letting his voice roll a little stronger. Laughter bursts behind the wood, like popcorn crackling. You can't help but smile. You notice how the doors are marked by status too. Wealthier homes display ornate carvings, brass knockers shaped like lions or tulips, and polished lintels. Poorer homes, by contrast, show bare planks, sometimes propped up with stones. Yet side by side they form the same street. No door here escapes the same dawn. The unusual fact you learn is that many of these wooden doors had secret openings built into them, a smaller hatch within the larger frame, designed so that one could peek out, pass food, or exchange whispers, without revealing the full interior. It's like having a medieval version of your apartment's peephole, except big enough to hand over a loaf of bread, or maybe a gossip-laden letter. You picture the drama that might have unfolded. Lovers slipping notes, merchants bargaining, children sneaking figs all through these miniature portals. The watchman stops to rest, leaning lightly on his staff. His breath puffs into the air, mixing with the faint steam of bread drifting from down the lane. You whisper to him, "Do you ever get tired of these streets?" He looks around slowly, eyes sweeping over the rows of doors, then shakes his head. "No, they get tired of me. First," his grin widens, "but if they didn't hear me, they'd miss me." You grin back, realizing he's right. Annoying as it might be, his voice is as much a part of these streets as the wood and stone themselves. The street narrows again, squeezing you into a path where the doors almost kiss across the alley. Above, laundry lines crisscross, sagging under the damp night air. A shirt drips onto your shoulder, cold and clammy, and you suppress a shiver. The watchman laughs softly. "Consider it a blessing." You mutter, "Feels more like a curse," but secretly you're amused. It's the kind of thing that would make you rage tweet today, but was simply accepted back then. You pause at one particularly small door, barely high enough for a child to duck through. The watchman explains, storage, sometimes animals, sometimes firewood. You run your fingers over its warped frame and wonder how many generations bent their backs to step through. Time presses itself into wood like fingerprints. Historians still debate whether these narrow streets of wooden houses were intentionally built to slow down potential invaders, or simply the product of limited urban planning. Either way, walking here feels like threading a needle. One misstep, and you're brushing elbows with history itself. The lantern light flickers as the watchman shields it against the breeze. The smell of damp ash drifts from a hearth where embers still glow faintly. Somewhere close you hear the rustle of straw as an animal shifts in its stall. Each sound sharpens your awareness of how alive the night is, even at its quietest. Modern comparisons keep sneaking into your mind. These doors remind you of endless rows of social media profiles, each one hiding entire lives, some decorated with care, others plain but functional, all lined up in the same feed. And just like scrolling, you want to peek inside to know what's behind each door. The difference? Here you'd get arrested for trying. So maybe less scrolling and more don't get caught. The watchman taps his staff again, raises his voice and sings the hour. The song floats through the street, brushing across the wood as if each door itself listens. For a moment, the whole lane feels like a choir, silent yet resonant, the grain of the wood vibrating with time. You wonder if the people behind the doors dream differently because of that voice, if their nights are tuned to the rhythm of his watch. As you step forward, the dawn creeps closer. A pale light tinges the edges of the doors, revealing scratches, stains, even children's chalk drawings left from earlier in the day. The night, with all its secrecy, begins to give way to the ordinary truth of morning. And yet, you sense that there are more secrets still tucked into these doors, waiting to be uncovered as the watchman turns toward the next bend, where the city hum will grow louder and something more stirring than wood and whispers will greet you. The watchman's voice stretches outward, no longer confined to the little wooden doors you've just left behind. It spreads like a silk ribbon unfurled into the wider street, weaving itself through shadows and chimney smoke, brushing against rooftops, threading under arches and curling into corners where even cats have tucked themselves away. His song is not a melody you'd find on a playlist. It's more like a chant, half sung, half spoken, punctuated by the thud of his staff on stone. It's not about being pretty. It's about being heard, and somehow it is. You feel the chill rise slightly sharper here. The open street draws the wind more freely and your breath clouds in front of you. Above, the stars blur against the faint paling sky. Lantern light seems weaker in this wider space, but the sound, it fills the emptiness. His voice swells like someone testing a microphone in an empty stadium, except the audience is mostly pigeons, cats, and that one neighbor who definitely regrets not buying thicker shutters. Time to wake, time to pray, the night is slipping away, were his refrain echoes, and you swear the very stones hum in sympathy. If you closed your eyes, you could almost believe the whole city was a drum, and his staff the steady beat keeping it alive. A door creaks, and an elderly woman peeks her head out, her scarf hastily wrapped. She calls out, "Sing softer, my husband. Dreams of soldiers again." The watchman chuckles and replies, "Then let him dream of victory, Taze." She scoffs and pulls the door shut, muttering something about men who think war is a lullaby. The reference pricks your mind toward that widely known moment, the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, when the Ottomans and Europeans clashed in one of history's great naval battles. You imagine sailors awake through the night, hearing songs not of watchmen, but of prayers before cannons roared. It feels strange, how the same empire that shook seas and empires also depended on humble voices like this to mark the hours back. Home! The watchman raises his tone again, but this time he elongates the words, letting them roll like waves. You notice something curious. He's not the only one. Faintly, from far across another district, another voice answers. It's softer, thinner, maybe from an older man or a younger apprentice, but the echo carries. It's like a duet across darkness, one voice calling, the other replying. The distance makes it eerie, like hearing your own echo misbehave. You ask him, "Do you always hear each other?" He nods with quiet satisfaction. "Yes, this way we know the hours are alive even when we don't see." So basically it's the 16th century version of group chat notifications, except you can't mute it or leave the group. The layered voices remind you of ASMR videos, where someone whispers in one ear, then another voice pops in from the other side, giving you chills. Here, though, the chill isn't optional. You're already shivering as a breeze whips down the stone corridor. It smells of coal smoke, stale beer from a tavern, and a sudden waft of fresh mint leaves crushed underfoot, probably dropped from some merchant's cart earlier. The air is a stew of ordinary life, reheated by the night. Your guide leans against a wall for a moment, lantern dangling low, and begins humming in a lower register. Without thinking, you hum along, your voice clumsy but earnest. He grins, teeth flashing in the dim light. "You'll get the rhythm," he says, "but don't worry, no one expects beauty." You laugh softly, realizing this is less about performance and more about marking time, about keeping the city in step with itself. From another angle, you catch a shadow darting. A boy with a bundle of kindling, rushing to deliver it to a bakery before dawn. The watchman calls after him, "Slow down, you'll trip." The boy doesn't stop, only yells back, "If I slow, the bread will burn." You can't help but smile. The city itself seems to argue and sing all at once. Then you notice something odd. Not all his calls are about time. Some slip in advice or even warnings. "Check your shutters, the wind rises." "Cover the coals before sleep." At one point he even mutters, "Tell your daughter to stop sneaking sweets." You glance. At him, raising an eyebrow, he winks. "They think I only sing hours, but I see everything." Suddenly you realize the watchman is not just a clock. He's neighborhood surveillance, a walking parental control app. The unusual fact slips in here. Some watchmen in Ottoman cities carried not only staffs and lanterns, but also small drums or flutes, which they used to mark festive nights like Ramadan. Imagine it, not only being sung awake, but sung awake with percussion at 4 a.m. That's basically the historical version of your neighbor buying a drum set for their kid. The soundscape grows thicker. You hear a rooster from somewhere above, the high-pitched squeak of a cartwheel turning as someone begins their morning route, and faint laughter from a group of apprentices sneaking out too early. The watchman's song folds itself into all this, both guiding and competing with it. Historians still debate how formalized these songs were, whether they followed a standard script or varied according to the creativity or sobriety of the singer. Listening to your watchman now, you suspect the latter. Sometimes his words are profound, sometimes they sound like improvised dad jokes wrapped in rhythm. "Do people ever throw things at you?" you ask with mock seriousness. He laughs, so hard he nearly drops the lantern. "Oh yes, once a shoe, another time soup." "Soup?" you say. He shrugs. "Cold, thankfully." You imagine someone hurling soup out of frustration. It's not far from the feeling of someone rage posting under a YouTube video they didn't have to watch. Human behavior, you realize, hasn't evolved that much. As dawn creeps closer, you feel the texture of the air change. It carries warmth now, the faint promise of sunlight. But the voices of the watchmen across districts continue to sing, a strange counterpoint to the city's shifting rhythms. You think of them as invisible threads, tying neighborhoods together long before text messages or clocks on towers. Each song across darkness is both a declaration and a reassurance. The city is alive, the city is safe, the city is moving through time together. The watchman's lantern sputters, a little oil left. He tips it carefully, coaxing the flame. His voice, though slightly hoarse now, does not falter. He clears his throat and sings again, more like a whisper meant for the walls themselves. The walls obligingly echo it back. You walk beside him, your footsteps blending with his beat, your ears still tuned to the other faint calls from distant quarters. It feels like a secret concert, only the night knows how to host. And just as you start to lose yourself in that rhythm, you catch something new, an unusual swell of voices ahead, not just one or two, but many, singing together in layered harmony. It is as though the night itself is drawing you forward, toward a place where songs don't just pass through darkness. They gather, they converge, they become something larger than one man's voice. You follow the watchman's lantern light into a quieter bend of the city, where the songs from afar thin into echoes and are replaced by something else. Flickers of fire behind stone walls, the pulse of life tucked into courtyards. These aren't grand plazas or mosques. These are the hidden lungs of the city, each courtyard breathing differently, each one glowing faintly like an ember in the dark. The first thing you notice is the warmth, the sudden difference in temperature as you pass, close to a heavy wooden gate that doesn't quite shut. Through the crack you glimpse a courtyard lit with candles. The air wafts with smoke laced with cinnamon, bread dough baking in a clay oven, and something sharper, lamp oil. The flames ripple as though nervous that you've seen them. You lean, closer, and a child's voice whispers from inside, "Who's there?" The watchman answers with his steady rhythm, "Only the night, little one." The child giggles, reassured, and disappears back into the glow. You realize how different the courtyards feel compared to the streets. They're softer, more intimate. Each flame you see is like a private post in a feed, not meant for you, but impossible not to peek at. Basically, you've just stumbled into the Ottoman version of Instagram stories, gone by sunrise, half hidden, and often showing people eating. A cat brushes against your leg, tail high, before vanishing through a cracked doorway. Inside, a man sits cross-legged, trimming candle wicks with fingers blackened by soot. His courtyard is lined with citrus trees in clay pots, their leaves trembling under the shifting light. He nods at the watchman. "Too many shadows tonight?" The watchman replies, "Not enough light." Their voices sound like old friends rehearsing lines from a play, comfortable and half in jest. You pause and let the details sink in. The hiss of candle wax dripping onto stone, the shuffle of sandals on gravel, the way smoke curls upward only to be flattened by the chill breeze above. Somewhere nearby, someone sings quietly. Not a watchman's chant this time, but a lullaby, cracked and tender, like the sound of paper crinkling. The sight of so many flames draws your mind toward history's larger fire, the Great Fire of Istanbul, in 1660, when thousands of homes, mosques, and shops burned. That memory lingers in the city's bones. Every candle flame here carries both comfort and threat. One gust, one mistake, and a neighborhood could vanish. The fragility of these little lights suddenly feels sharper. And yet, the unusual fact: some households actually paid young boys, known as candle watchers, to sit in courtyards through the night and make sure flames didn't tip into disaster. Imagine being hired for the night shift with the job description, "Don't let everything burn." That's like giving a teenager the Wi-Fi password and saying, "Guard this with your life." The watchman leads you onward, through narrower passages where the light spills in thin slices. You notice small altars, corners with bowls of rosewater where candles float like tiny suns. At one courtyard, a family gathers for an early meal, flatbread tearing, tea steaming in cups. The father looks up at the watchman. "You're late." "Tonight," the watchman grins. "Time is slower when you stare too much," the man snorts. "Tell that to my stomach." The humor between them feels timeless, the same tone you'd hear from co-workers debating who's late to lunch. These little exchanges thread humanity through the flickering shadows, and then the sensory cascade hits, warm bread smell crashing into your hunger, citrus blossoms drifting in sweet counterpoint, the faint metallic tang of candle snuffers clinking against stone, the glow painting everything in amber. Your own body feels pulled into the rhythm, a shiver at the breeze on your neck, a sigh at the warmth spilling out of gates, your eyes constantly adjusting from shadow to flame. Historians still debate how many candles an ordinary household might burn in one night, whether a single taper was luxury or necessity. Looking around, you'd argue it was both. Status for some, survival for others. You see courtyards with elaborate candelabras, flames glinting off polished brass, others with just a single stub of wax, struggling to hold back the dark. A boy runs past, clutching a bundle of reeds for wicks. The watchman stops him with a tap of his staff. "Slow down, you'll drop them." "But Effendi, the baker waits." "Bread is patient," the watchman replies. You almost laugh. Bread, as far as you know, has never been patient. It's more like your phone battery. Once it runs out, chaos. The voices of distant watchmen fade here, drowned by the softer sounds of life behind walls. You realize that while the streets belong to the singers, the courtyards belong to the quiet ones, the sleepers, the bakers, the keepers of flame. The balance feels delicate. Chants outside, whispers within. You linger at a gate left slightly ajar. Inside, a woman leans over a basin, rinsing vegetables in candlelight. Water splashes softly. Green herbs release their scent and the flicker catches on her bracelets. She hums to herself, unaware of her accidental audience. It's a scene so private you almost step back, embarrassed. But the watchman simply nods and moves on, as though this intimacy is part of his nightly duty to witness, not disturb. The humor of it all sneaks up again. Courtyards lit with dozens of candles to chase the dark, while the city's actual fire brigade is basically neighbors with buckets. It's like installing 10 smart bulbs in your room, but forgetting to buy a smoke alarm. Still, there's beauty in the vulnerability. Every flickering courtyard feels like a heartbeat, each flame holding off both shadow and silence. The watchman taps his staff, a reminder that he too is a kind of candle, moving, fragile but stubbornly bright. And then, as you round another corner, you catch a glimpse that makes you pause. Ahead, a courtyard is not just lit, it blazes. With dozens of candles, their flames steady despite the wind. Voices rise there, layered, purposeful, not casual like the meals or lullabies you've passed. It feels ceremonial, deliberate, as if these flames aren't just for light but for something larger, something binding the neighborhood together. You draw closer, the glow painting your path gold, and realize you're about to step into a courtyard where candles aren't just survival, they're symbols. The flames you left behind still glow in your memory, but the watchman leads you further, his lantern bobbing through winding streets until the walls begin to swell and the alleys widen. Suddenly the air changes. It's heavier, loaded with spices and stale smoke, tinged with copper and sweat. You've stepped into the veins of the city, the grand bazaar, even though it's night and the stalls are shuttered. You expect silence, but instead echoes ripple all around. Footsteps, murmurs, a stray laugh, like the marketplace is still awake under its breath. The first sound that hits you is metal, the clatter of locks being tested, shutters groaning as wood adjusts in the cool air. A merchant coughs inside his stall unseen, but the smell of wool and saffron seeps out from the cracks. It's like the bazaar itself is asleep, but dreaming loudly. You glance up, and the vaults overhead look endless, their arches shadowed yet, trembling faintly with candlelight left burning in corners. The watchman taps his staff, and the sound travels unnervingly far, bouncing off stone and returning with doubled force. He mutters, half to himself, "The bazaar always talks back." You feel it too. It's like standing in a cathedral of commerce, a holy place for goods, where even silence doesn't stay still. You brush against bales of fabric, their perfume, faint but distinct, indigo dye sharp on your nose, silk whispering when your sleeve passes, hemp coarse and dry. Somewhere a rat scuttles, squeaking indignantly at being disturbed, the furry night shift manager. The air is cooler here though, held by stone, almost like a natural refrigerator. If you had a slice of watermelon, you'd definitely stash it here till morning. Then laughter, actual laughter, bursts from behind a locked grate. A group of apprentices have clearly decided this maze is the perfect spot for after-hours hide-and-seek. One boy calls out, "You can't find me." Another shouts, "I'll sell you for 2 akçe." The watchman stops, scowls, then softens. He knocks the staff twice. "Go home before I charge interest." The boys giggle louder, scattering into shadows. You realize he's less of a policeman, more of a reluctant babysitter, armed only with sternness and sarcasm. As you walk deeper, the smell shifts again. Now leather, glue, and something sharper. The acrid tang of metal filings from smiths who work till late. The echoes overlap so that every step you take feels like someone's behind you, keeping pace. You half expect to turn and see not your shadow, but centuries of buyers and sellers pressing close. Your mind flashes to a widely known moment, when the bazaar itself nearly collapsed during the great earthquake of 1509, known as the Little Apocalypse. Imagine this cavernous place rocking, vaults shuddering, silk falling like waves. The idea makes you look up nervously, half convinced the ceiling might still sway. But here's the strange fact you didn't expect. Some merchants actually slept inside their stalls at night, curled on rugs among their goods, guarding them like dragons with treasure. You picture one tucked between bolts of cloth, probably snoring loud enough to rattle the shutters, dreaming of bargaining victories. That's commitment, or maybe just the Ottoman version of camping. "Did you ever sleep here?" you whisper to the watchman. He smirks. "Once. Worst bed in Istanbul. Smelled like onions for a week." You can't help but laugh, imagining him wedged between sacks of produce like an unwilling garnish. Historians still debate how much control the guilds, truly had over these stalls at night? Were they strictly regulated, or was it more of a friendly chaos? Standing here, you sense both. Order stamped into the architecture, but life leaking through cracks in laughter, whispers, and hidden candles. The watchman steers you past a spice stall. Though the shutters are closed, the scent refuses to stay. Trapped? Cumin earthy and dense, cloves sharp like little sparks in your nose, cinnamon warm enough to stir hunger. Your stomach growls loud enough that the watchman glances at you sideways. Hear that? He asks. The bazaar never sleeps. You retort, that was me. He grins. Exactly. You pass by copperware shops next, their plates stacked, behind bars. The moonlight slips through a crack and hits them just right, sending tiny sparks across the path. It's so hypnotic that you nearly walk into a post. The watchman chuckles under his breath. Careful, the bazaar charges for damages. At one corner, you stop because the echoes shift again. This time, it's not laughter or steps, but something, like chanting. Low, rhythmic, distant. You press your ear to the stone and the sound hums faintly back, a prayer perhaps, or night laborers singing to keep time. The air is so thick with resonance that it feels like the walls themselves are holding secrets. There's an odd comfort here. Even in darkness, the bazaar feels alive, safer than the empty fields outside the city. If streets are veins, then this. Places a heart pumping quietly through the night. The watchman seems to agree. He lingers as though listening for the heartbeat too, and yet shadows slide. You glimpse a figure darting between columns, carrying something bulky under a cloth. A thief? A merchant sneaking an extra load? The watchman only shakes his head. Always ghosts in the bazaar. Some are alive, some are not. Doesn't matter. He doesn't chase. You feel a chill, both from the stone and from the thought that commerce has left behind not just goods, but spirits. The humor creeps back when you realize how much this place resembles a giant shopping mall after closing. Hours, silent, eerie, but still faintly buzzing with leftover energy. Except here, instead of mannequins in skinny jeans, you've got sacks of chickpeas staring you down. Definitely less fashionable, but probably more practical. The watchman halts at a central court where 4 corridors meet. The echo here is overwhelming. You clear your throat and it comes back fivefold, like a choir mocking you. The watchman drops his chant and instead calls out a single note. It ricochets, multiplying until the whole court seems to sing. He grins, satisfied. See? Even stone keeps the hour. In that moment you understand this isn't just commerce, this is theater. By day it dazzles with colors and shouts, by night it hums with memory, rehearsing itself for morning. And as you step toward the far exit, you feel the air shift again, cooler, sharper, touched by a draft. Ahead beyond the arches, another space waits. Not courtyards, not market, but something even larger where sound won't bounce but swell. The watchman lifts his lantern higher, its glow trembling at the edge of the unknown. You realize the bazaar's echoes have led you straight toward the wide breadth of the mosque courtyards. You step out of the bazaar's throat and suddenly the night stretches wide. The air no longer presses close with spice and fabric dust. Instead it opens, cool and clean, with a faint sharpness like river water poured over marble. The courtyard before you is so vast it feels like your footsteps shrink inside it, your body becoming smaller with every step toward the mosque's bulk. Above, the minarets spear the dark sky, their silhouettes faintly glowing where the moonlight brushes. Stone, the first thing you notice is the sound. Unlike the bazaar where everything ricocheted, here the air holds silence like a bowl holds water. A single footstep rings long, the marble answering politely before fading into night. A stray dog's claws tick against the flagstones somewhere. Near the fountain, each tap magnified, crisp as a metronome. The silence isn't empty, though. It's thick, purposeful, as if the stones themselves are waiting for the next call to prayer. You exhale, and even your breath feels disrespectful. Too loud, like opening a bag of chips in a silent library. The watchman gives you a look that says exactly that. The smells drift different here, too. Instead of cumin and smoke, you catch the mineral bite of whetstone, the faint sweetness of rosewater lingering at the ablution fountain, and, just faintly, the smell of ash from braziers once used to warm hands in winter. Your skin feels the chill creep in, air brushing against you like cool silk. The watchman leads you past the fountain, dipping his staff against the stone. Hear that? he murmurs. The staff's tap doesn't echo like before. It sinks, cushioned by the openness. The mosque swallows sound, keeps it. You mutter back, "Wish my room could swallow the sound of my neighbor's TV." He chuckles. Here, even gossip dies quiet. At the edge of the courtyard, lamps flicker faintly where caretakers left them, their flames quivering in drafts. Moths circle, stubborn as unpaid interns. The light carves deep shadows under the arches, where inscriptions run like rivers of stone script. You lean close, tracing them with your eyes. The words aren't just decoration. They're reminders stitched into the architecture of who built this, who prayed here, and who might overhear you now. A gust comes, stronger than before, swirling around the minaret's base. The sound it makes is eerie, a low whistle, almost like a flute. You glance up and realize the minaret isn't just a tower. It's a giant wind instrument playing the night. The watchman grins at your wide-eyed stare. Wait until the call. His voice softens. It will wake the stone. You pause at the thought, because this was the stage for history's loudest calls, when Mehmed the Conqueror himself walked into Hagia Sophia after 1453, declaring it a mosque, and the first adhan, call to prayer, rose from its minaret. That moment echoed across empires, a sound announcing an age. And yet here you are, centuries later, hearing only the quiet anticipation, like the orchestra pit before a concert. Still, the grandeur doesn't erase the small details. A cat darts out from under a bench, brushing against your ankle with all the entitlement of a royal inspector. You flinch, then laugh, realizing this courtyard belongs to cats more than kings. The watchman only nods. They guard better than soldiers. You joke, "Do they get paid in fish?" He answers, straight-faced, "Better in leftovers from the Imaret kitchen." That mention pulls your senses toward the faint scent of stew drifting from across the complex. The Imaret, the charitable, soup kitchen attached to many mosques, never really slept. Somewhere in the shadows, cooks stirred pots even at night, preparing for dawn. You imagine the steam rising, mingling with prayers and marble dust, feeding both stomach and spirit. There's an unusual fact the watchman shares while you pass the fountain again. Did you know some minarets have spiral stairs so narrow that muezzins climbed them sideways? You picture it instantly. Someone shuffling like a crab, clutching the wall, out of breath halfway up. Not exactly the graceful image you'd expect. Sounds like cardio with extra humiliation, you say. He smirks. Exactly why they practiced. Your eyes tilt upward again. The minaret looms impossibly high, tapering like a candle frozen mid-melt. The small balcony near the top looks fragile from here, but you know it once held a voice that could command the whole city. Historians still debate whether early calls to prayer here were entirely sung or half-chanted, blending Byzantine and Ottoman tones. Listening to the wind tease the stone, you swear you can almost hear those layered voices, ghostly choirs arguing across centuries. The courtyard, though, is not empty of human life. A shadow detaches itself near the colonnade, an old caretaker, with a broom. He sweeps slowly, deliberately, the rasp of straw on marble scratching the silence. The watchman greets him. "You again?" The man shrugs. Stone doesn't dust itself. They exchange a glance that says this is a ritual, older than both. You catch yourself staring at the marble underfoot, so polished it reflects slivers of moonlight. Every slab feels cold, your soul's tingling, as if the ground itself is alive. Somewhere water trickles faintly in channels beneath, cooling the structure like veins beneath skin. It strikes you that this isn't just architecture, it's choreography. From courtyard to fountain to minaret, your steps are guided as if rehearsing prayer without words. Even your silence feels scripted. The humor creeps back when you notice pigeons huddled on a ledge, heads tucked under wings, perfectly lined, like feathery security cameras. They look stern, judgmental, as though reporting your every move to some higher authority. You wave at them. One blinks, unimpressed. Figures. The night deepens, but instead of darker, it feels wider, stretched, thin between the mosque's domes and the minaret tips. Stars scatter above, dim against the city glow, but still there. You tilt your head and the perspective makes the minaret look like it's stabbing straight into the constellation. For a second, It feels like sound, stone, and sky are bound together, waiting for the first note to tie them. The watchman lowers his staff, leaning on it. His breath curls in the cool air. Between mosque and minaret, he says softly, you hear the city's true spine. You believe him. Because here, in this fragile pause before dawn, you feel the balance. Earth pressing up through marble. Heaven pressing down through sky, and between them, just you, small and listening. And yet far away, a faint noise stirs. Drums, uneven, but growing. The watchman tilts his head. Janissaries. His voice is calm, but your pulse skips. The courtyard feels suddenly like a stage again, about to host not prayer, but something louder, rougher, and entirely alive. The drums are closer now. Their thud rolls over the marble, not echoing, but pressing down like a heartbeat you can't escape. You feel it in your ribs, uneven yet relentless, as if the night itself has changed tempo. The courtyard that moments ago felt infinite suddenly feels smaller, contained, like the walls are bracing for what's about to arrive. The watchman pauses mid-step, leaning on his staff. They march like this on purpose, he mutters. So, no one rests easy. His tone has the dryness of someone who's been annoyed by these drums since the invention of bedtime. And then you see them, shadows lengthening across the arches, boots striking in staggered rhythm. The Janissaries. Their approach is heavy not just in sound but in meaning. The empire's backbone, the sultan's household troops, the men who carried responsibility on shoulders broader than the marble domes above. The air shifts when they enter. Leather, oil, sweat, and faint traces of gunpowder roll in like an invisible tide, muscling aside the rosewater still lingering by the fountain. You inhale and instantly regret it. The scent clings sharp, like the inside of an old gym bag, but with more historical gravitas. Their armor clinks faintly, not flashy but purposeful. The moonlight slides along the curve of helmets, sparks against steel buckles, and dies in the folds of heavy cloth. Their shadows stretch unnervingly long across the marble, as though each man carries three more behind him. One Janissary breaks from the group, his boots a sharp click against the flagstones. He eyes you like you've wandered into rehearsal, uninvited. You're still here? He asks. You blink. Tourist route said open until dawn? His brow furrows, then, unexpectedly, he smirks. Careful. The tourist route sometimes ends at the dungeon. The watchman coughs, pretending not to enjoy this exchange too much. The weight in this moment isn't just physical. It's history compressing itself into presence. You remember that the Janissaries weren't just soldiers, they were political kingmakers. In 1622, they even mutinied and executed Sultan Osman II, dragging him from his chambers in the palace. Widely known, often retold, that moment crystallized the terrifying truth. The guardians could turn into executioners, yet here, tonight, they look less like rebels and more like guardians of a fragile order. They spread through the courtyard, some leaning spears against the colonnade, others lowering themselves onto benches with groans that sound timeless. The scrape of metal against stone is steady, almost rehearsed. Their presence makes the marble seem smaller still, the silence thinner. You shift uncomfortably and one soldier chuckles. First time. You nod. Don't worry, he says, we don't bite. Then after a pause, unless you touch the drums. You're not sure if he's joking. His grin isn't reassuring. The drums themselves sit near the fountain. Massive kettles of bronze and hide. Their surfaces still hum faintly from the march. A boy, probably an apprentice drummer, wipes sweat from his brow, then leans on one drumhead with the defeated sigh of a teenager denied Wi-Fi. He catches your eye and shrugs, as if to say, yeah, this is my life now. The atmosphere is heavy with hierarchy. You notice how the apprentices carry themselves lower, shoulders bent under invisible loads, while the veterans move with a steadiness that says they've already survived more than one siege. You realize the weight of responsibility isn't abstract. It's lived in their spines, their joints, their silences. Another sensory wave hits you, the warmth radiating from their bodies, thick enough that the courtyard's earlier chill has lifted. The night air now feels like a tent heated by too many people. Sweat slicks the back of your neck, and you think longingly of fans and air conditioning, luxuries history cruelly withheld. But amid the heaviness, humor leaks through. A pair of janissaries argue over who's supposed to guard the southern gate. "You took it last time," one insists. The other snorts. "Last time was 3 nights ago. I've aged since then." Their laughter bounces softly off the marble, proving that even empire builders complain about night shifts. The watchman watches them with a mix of pride and wariness. "They're trusted with more than steel," he tells you quietly. "Sometimes with the empire's secrets." You tilt your head, curious. Carrying messages, guarding royal children, escorting foreign ambassadors. Sometimes, he hesitates, keeping the Sultan himself in line. That weight presses harder than any drumbeat. You imagine a life where loyalty is demanded daily, where one wrong decision could ripple across continents. And yet you see it in their faces. Some are barely older than the candle watchers you saw earlier in the night. Youth pressed into armor, asked to carry responsibility far heavier than their frames. An unusual fact slips into your mind. Something, the watchman mutters as though remembering gossip. They say some janissaries weren't allowed to marry until retirement. Kept their devotion pure, they said. Or lonely, depending on who you ask. You glance at the apprentice slumped on the drum. He looks about 16 and already exhausted. You can't help but whisper to yourself, historians still debate whether that was discipline fire or just cruelty. The night thickens around you. The lamps flicker lower, shadows pooling deeper under arches. The minarets above no longer whistle. Instead, they stand silent, as though listening too. The drums sit quiet, their skins stretched tight, waiting for the next command. One soldier stands, stretching until his joints crack like dry twigs. "We carry the city tonight," he says, half to himself. The words hang in the courtyard, weighty and unanswerable. You feel that weight too, not just in history, not just in stone, but in the living press of men, the rhythm of their duty. It settles on your shoulders like an invisible cloak, reminding you that responsibility isn't an abstract word. It's the sound of boots on marble, the smell of sweat and oil, the silence before the drumbeat starts again. And just as you steady yourself in that thought, a sound cuts across the courtyard, distant, metallic, sharp as a blade against stone. Not a drum this time, but a bell. The watchman's head lifts, eyes narrowing. "That," he says softly, "is the palace." The Kai. Courtyard shifts, tense again, as though history is about to lean harder. The bell still rings faintly, each metallic note scattering like startled birds into the marble night, when you notice something new, softer, stranger. A rustle where there shouldn't be one. It's not armor, not the sweep of robes, but the quick, nervous flutter of feet too light to belong to janissaries. You turn your head, squinting toward the shadowed edges of the courtyard, and there they are. A cluster of small faces half hidden behind the columns. Children. Their eyes glimmer in the moonlight, wide and restless, reflections of a city that refuses to sleep. The watchman sighs when he spots them. "Always," he mutters. "Like cats. You chase one away, 3 more sneak in." The children giggle at being caught, though their laughter is thin and hushed, the way kids laugh when they know they shouldn't even be there. Their sandals whisper against the stone, and one boy's oversized shirt droops like a sail in the night breeze. You feel a sharp pang. Childhood, folding itself around the edges of empire and danger, stubbornly making space. One of the janissaries notices too, his brows rising under the shadow of his helmet. "Who let them in?" he asks, mock stern. "They let themselves in," the watchman replies dryly. The soldier grunts. "Future spies, all of them." A girl no older than 9 pipes up from the shadows. "We already know everything." The courtyard bursts briefly into chuckles. The smell shifts again. Faint traces of sesame bread tucked under one child's arm, the crust still warm enough to steam in the cool night. Another clutches a fig-like treasure. The air blends soldiers. Leather, lamp smoke, and childish contraband snacks, a recipe so confusing it could be bottled as ode to midnight mischief. You crouch slightly, lowering your voice as though you're in on their secret. "Why are you here?" The boy with the too big shirt shrugs. We want to hear the stories. What stories? The ones they don't tell us in the day, he says, matter of fact, as if nighttime unlocks a different syllabus. The children creep closer, emboldened. Their bare feet pad soft as cats, and the marble kisses their skin with cold. One girl wraps her arms around her knees, shivering but refusing to leave. Their eyes flick between Janissaries, Watchmen, and you, hungry for words, for secrets, for that invisible weight that grown-ups pretend not to carry, and suddenly you understand. This is how memory leaks into the future. Not by proclamations, in daylight, but by children sneaking into courtyards, ears wide open. The Janissaries pretend indifference, but you can see the corners of their mouths tugging upward. One finally breaks character, leaning down and addressing the cluster. "You know about the siege of Vienna?" he asks. Half the children shake their heads. One boy nods enthusiastically, even though he clearly doesn't. The soldier chuckles. "Big battle, 1683. We marched all the way to their walls, thought we'd win, thought we'd take the city, and then..." His eyes drop, his tone lowering. "We lost. Badly." The courtyard stills a little, even the pigeons on the minaret. Ledges fluffing their feathers like disapproving librarians. One girl asks, "Why did you lose?" The soldier shrugs, glancing at his comrades. Too many reasons, too much pride. And maybe because they had better snacks. The children laugh again, loud enough that one soldier hushes them, but even his warning carries a smile. Then comes another layer of detail. The watchman leans closer to you, murmuring, "Not all stories are told." Some nights children heard whispers about fire signals, how towers across the Bosphorus flashed coded light, carrying secrets faster than any messenger. He pauses, as though weighing whether to say more. Historians still debate how much. Those signals changed the wars. The kids lean in further, their faces small moons glowing in the half-light. They're greedy for the forbidden, even if the forbidden is only fragments of memory carried by tired men. You can smell the oil lamps guttering now, their smoke curling low, mixing with the tang of iron weapons and the faint sweetness of figs, crushed under careless hands. A boy sneezes suddenly, the sound sharp as a musket crack, and the group erupts into hushed giggles again. One soldier raises his hand, pretending to scowl. "You shouldn't be here." The boldest girl tilts her head. "Then why are you telling us stories?" He freezes, caught. Because you listen better than grown-ups. The weight of responsibility that filled the last hour shifts strangely here. On the shoulders of children, it's lighter, not because they don't understand, but because they believe stories are survival. You realize you're watching the Empire's future, scribbling its notes in secret, without parchment, without ink, just memory stitched into midnight. Another unusual fact drifts into the air, this time from an older soldier. Some nights children would sneak into the kitchens too. They'd hide under the tables while the cooks prepared food for the divan. They'd memorize conversations without anyone knowing. He smirks. That's how rumors traveled faster than couriers. The thought lingers in your mind. An empire? So vast, yet undone at times by crumbs of overheard speech, by children pressed against doors, by fig-sticky hands holding secrets. You lean against a column, the stone cold against your back, and close your eyes briefly. You hear the overlapping rhythms, the children's quick breaths, the soldiers' slower sighs, the faint buzz of insects around the lamps, the bell still fading somewhere toward the palace. When you open them again, the children have drawn closer. Still, sitting in a rough circle as though this courtyard were their classroom. The Janissaries for once don't resist. One sharpens his blade idly but keeps talking, his voice threading through the night. Another plucks at his bowstring, letting the vibrations hum like a secret code. And you realize this. Empire might be built on stone and steel, but it is carried forward on whispers, on the small ears of children who aren't supposed to hear. The watchman taps his staff gently, the sound echoing like punctuation. "Time for bed," he says, half to the kids, half to you. But the children don't move. They lean forward, eyes burning brighter, as if the night has only just begun. The weight of responsibility has shifted again. What was once armor and foul Duty now feels like the fragile trust between generations, a responsibility to carry stories through the cracks. And as the lamps tremble with their last oil, you catch something in the distance. A faint rattle, like iron doors moving. The sound rolls toward you from the palace side, heavier than a bell, heavier even than the drums. Something else is about to open. The iron groan from the palace fades, and in its wake something quieter takes over, so soft you almost miss it. A brush of fur against stone, a paw pattering in the dark, then a low, drawn-out yawn that seems to mock the solemn weight of everything happening here. The true rulers of the courtyard are arriving one by one, with tails flicking like banners. Cats. They move like liquid shadows between the children, around the janissaries' boots, and even under the watchman's staff. No one calls them, no one feeds them, and yet they come as if summoned by the night itself. Their eyes gleam with that eerie green shine, as though they've been absorbing the moonlight and now return it, two at a time, unblinking. One child whispers to you, "They listen better than we do." You nod. They also judge harder. The boy snickers but hushes himself quickly as a ginger cat leaps onto the fountain's rim, tail curling like a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. The smell shifts once again. Faint fishiness. From the cat's fur, mingled with the iron scent of weapons, smoke from oil lamps and sesame breadcrumbs now shamelessly stolen. A little girl squeals when her snack disappears under a feline paw, though her laughter is muffled, like laughter in a library. You crouch lower to see them better. The cats treat the janissaries with insolence, rubbing against their greaves, curling into their capes, even batting at a dangling tassel. One soldier mutters, "Better companions than half the men I've served with." Another replies, "At least they don't snore." The watchman clears his throat. "You know, in some years of plague, people swore the cats carried messages. From the dead." His voice is half serious, half teasing. Historians still debate whether those stories were warnings or just excuses for why food went missing. The children lean forward at once, their little hands reaching out cautiously. Cats sniff their fingers, accept strokes, and retreat with disdain when touched too eagerly. You recognize this rhythm instantly, the universal law of cats, always in charge, never predictable. Honestly, if empires had been run by felines, they might have lasted forever, though meetings would start only when the cats woke up, which, judging by their schedule, is never. A soldier with a scar across his cheek sits down, armor clinking softly. A black cat curls in his lap without hesitation. "Silent companions," he murmurs. "They keep watch when we can't." You notice something strange. The more the cats gather, the quieter the courtyard feels. The metallic rattle from the palace door, the echo of drums, even the lamp hiss, muted now under the soft gravity of fur and purr. The empire feels less like an army, more like a home someone forgot to tidy. Another unusual fact drifts out from the watchman's lips. "Did you know," he says, stroking the ginger cat now seated like a sultan on the fountain, "that Sultan Bayezid once ordered the construction of little stone shelters just for stray cats and dogs? Feeding them was considered a good deed." The children gasp, as though this detail is far grander than any siege or battle. You look around, noting the tiny sounds that fill the silence, claws ticking against marble, the faint thump of tails, and that steady undercurrent of purring, layered like a bass line beneath the night. It's the kind of sound that sneaks into your chest, loosening something inside you. "Why are they always here?" one boy asks. "Because they know everything," replies a soldier without missing a beat. The boy frowns. "Even more than you?" The soldier chuckles, low and weary. "Especially more than me." A child suddenly bursts out with a theory. Maybe the cats hear secrets and tell them to the sultans in their dreams. The courtyard breaks into chuckles again. "If that were true," another soldier quips, "the empire would have already been overrun by demands for more fish." Still, you can't quite dismiss the idea. The cats do move as though carrying invisible scrolls in their whiskers, like spies who never need words. You think of all the meetings in the divan, the strategies, the secrets whispered under domes, and realize the cats were probably present for all of it, padding across carpets, unnoticed, while history unfolded. The air cools again, a breeze, slipping through the courtyard arches. Lamps flicker low and one cat stretches luxuriously, flipping onto its back as though claiming the marble itself. You glance at the janissaries, and even they seem softened. The armor around them less rigid, their eyes following the lazy arc of a tail rather than the edge of a sword. For a moment, the tension from the palace door fades into this strange harmony. The Empire waits outside, but inside these walls the night belongs to creatures with no allegiance, no duty, only presence. You remember a widely known story now, almost as if the cats themselves plant it in your mind. During the Great Fire of Constantinople in 1660, flames tore across wooden homes, mosques and shops. People said the animals fled before the humans did, as if they smelled the disaster in advance. Some even swore the cats meowed warnings at doors, their cries mistaken for nuisance until it was too late. The children are enchanted. Do they still remember it? One girl whispers. You smile, glancing at the ginger cat still enthroned on the fountain. Maybe they do. Maybe they never forget. The thought lingers like smoke. Cats as keepers of memory, silent witnesses to both triumph and ruin. You realize you're not just surrounded by animals. You're surrounded by living archives that purr instead of speak. And in their silence, the night grows heavier again. The iron doors beyond the palace rattle once more, not just stirring but straining now, as though something larger is about to emerge. Even the cats pause, ears flicking in unison, eyes snapping toward the sound. The harmony is broken, replaced by expectation. And with that, you know, companionship, even silent, can only carry you so far before the next weight of history presses forward. You step out from the hush of the courtyard, ears still humming with the silence cats left behind, and the city grabs you again. The moon hangs like a patient lamp over the Bosphorus, casting silver threads across rooftops and alleyways. The palace doors are still groaning behind you, but the sound fades, replaced by something warmer. Murmurs, low laughter, the clink of tiny porcelain cups. The scent hits you before the sight. Roasted beans, thick and earthy, wrapped in smoke curling. Lazily from narrow chimneys, Ottoman coffee houses, open even at this hour, are glowing pockets in the dark, beacons for everyone who isn't asleep. You drift closer, drawn by the rhythm of spoons against saucers. The air shifts again, out goes the iron tang of weapons, and in comes coffee's heavy perfume, mixed with the faint sweetness of honeyed locum stacked on low trays. Inside, men huddle over backgammon boards, dice clicking like impatient beetles, while storytellers wag fingers in dramatic arcs. A boy squeezes in beside you, whispering, "They say whole revolts started in here." You grin. Imagine starting. A revolution over an espresso shot. Sounds familiar, right? The truth isn't far off. In these smoky rooms, news spread faster than couriers could carry it. Murmurs about taxes, rumors of wars, or whispers that the Sultan had sneezed one too many times. By the time dawn broke, half the city might believe a new decree was in place. Coffee houses weren't just cafes, they were Twitter feeds with stronger caffeine and no mute button. The light inside flickers golden, thrown off hanging oil lamps swaying gently in the draft. Shadows bend over walls painted with smoke, so thick you could write your name in it. The temperature drops near the doorway, but a wave of heat pushes out every time someone laughs too hard or slams a fist on a wooden table. Careful, an older man at the next table tells you, tapping his cup. This is not just coffee. This is patience boiled down, you nod solemnly, and insomnia bottled up. He chuckles, slurping noisily, because table manners apparently don't apply after midnight. One unusual fact slips into the conversation. Some sultans outright banned coffee houses, afraid that too much caffeine mixed with politics might brew insurrection. Guards would storm in, pour coffee pots into the street and haul people off. Yet the moment bans were lifted, or simply ignored, shops reopened like mushrooms after rain. Historians still debate whether those bans were about genuine political fear or just jealous guilds protecting their turf. Either way, you sip the bitter, thick liquid in front of you and think, This is way too strong to be outlawed. Your heart is already racing like you've checked your email at 3 a.m. A storyteller captures your attention. He's tall, his robe brushing the floor, his gestures slicing through the smoke. His voice rises and falls like a muezzin's call, weaving a tale of Mehmed the Conqueror and the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Everyone leans in, cups halfway to lips, as if hearing it for the first time, even though the story is etched into every brick of the city. When the storyteller describes cannons thundering at the walls, a waiter drops a tray by accident, and the clang lands perfectly, like planned sound effects. The children who snuck from the courtyard earlier have found their way here too. They press noses to the window, eyes wide at the sight of so many cups and boards. One slips inside, grinning as he asks, "Can we play?" A man with a moustache so wide it could shelter a pigeon growls playfully. "Only if you promise not to win," the boy smirks. "Then I'll definitely win." The dice clatter, pieces move. For a second, empire and duty vanish under the universal drama of board games. Someone groans at a loss, another cheers, and you realize laughter in here is sharper, freer than in the courtyard. It cuts through the dark like little sparks. Modern comparison, the place feels like your local coffee shop at 2 a.m. Half students, cramming, half philosophers arguing, and one person who just came for Wi-Fi, but is now somehow in a debate about the meaning of life. You wouldn't survive it, not with this brew. One cup feels like an all-nighter in liquid form. Another soldier sidles up beside you, his armor muted by the thick air. He lowers his voice. "Did you know some men were accused of practicing fortune-telling with coffee grounds? They'd swirl the cup, peer into the muddy rings, and claim the Empire's fate was at the bottom." You raise an eyebrow. "So basically the first horoscope apps." He chuckles, shaking his head. "Except these were less accurate. Still, you glance into your own cup. The thick residue clings stubbornly to porcelain, shaping hills and rivers in miniature. For a flicker, you swear you see the Bosphorus itself traced in brown. Maybe superstition isn't so foolish after all. The smell grows heavier as more pots boil. Steam escapes lids with a hiss, wrapping around you like a damp shawl. Candles gutter low, dripping wax onto already scarred tables. The air is hot, sticky, but somehow you lean closer, caught by the hum of conversation that never really stops, just ebbs and flows. And then you hear it. Beneath the talk, beneath the clatter, someone plucking strings of an oud. The notes are mellow, dipping like pebbles dropped into water, rising again with a tremble. Conversations pause as the melody floats above heads, silvery and sad, like a moonbeam you could hear. The music stitches the room tighter, makes strangers tilt toward each other. Every night it's the same, the mustached man tells you, softer now. Coffee, smoke, and music. If the Sultan tried to take this away, he'd have to lock up half the city. Your mind drifts again to the palace doors behind you, still restless, still threatening to open fully. The Empire is straining at its hinges, yet here in this dim-lit room, people pretend time is syrup thickening in their cups. They are rebels, dreamers, gossipers, all armed with nothing but spoons and dice. And as you sit in this haze, you realize coffee houses weren't distractions. From history, they were the pulse of it. Silent companions may keep watch, but these smoky rooms carried the whispers that could tilt thrones. The oud strings quiver again, and someone taps the side of your cup, urging you to drink before it cools. You raise it, inhale the bitter sweetness, and catch one last detail. A shadow slipping past the window, palace-ward, carrying news faster than the wind. Which means whatever waits beyond those iron doors may already be stirring in the cups and whispers around you. You leave the coffee house, blinking against the shift from smoky gold to moonlit silver. The night air cools your skin instantly, tugging away the sticky warmth that clung to you inside. Behind, the oud keeps plucking, muffled now, but the city has other songs. The stones under your shoes are uneven, slick with dew, and every corner you turn feels like peeling back another layer of Istanbul. Constantinople before that, Byzantium before that still. You realize you're walking not on a single city, but on a stack of centuries, each one laid down like an impatient baker slapping more dough onto a pie. The smell changes every few steps. Charcoal smoke drifts from a brazier, where a man turns chestnuts, their skins crackling like fireworks in miniature. Further along, the breeze carries salt from the Bosphorus, sharp and cool, slicing through the sweetness of roasted nuts. Then comes the faint musk of damp stone stairways, the kind that plunge down into forgotten cisterns no one bothers locking. The city is an olfactory kaleidoscope. You get whiplash if you breathe too deeply. A guide of sorts materializes beside you, a wiry man with eyes like polished olives. He says, "Every street is built on top of another. You walk on stones of Romans, you lean against walls of Byzantines, you drink coffee in Ottoman shadow." You smirk. Sounds like the city version of a lasagna. He chuckles. Except, this one never finishes baking. You step into a square where lanterns swing on iron hooks, their flames trembling in the night breeze. Cats dart between paving cracks, chasing shadows more than rats. The air is busy with sound. Donkeys' hooves. Clopping, boat horns lowing from the water, a baby wailing in some hidden chamber above. If cities could dream aloud, this would be its restless muttering. You glance at a wall chipped and scarred, and the guide tells you it once belonged to a Byzantine palace, later converted into an Ottoman warehouse. A boy runs a stick along its length, the hollow taps echoing like a heartbeat of stone. This is history you don't read, you hear, layer by layer, sound pressed into stone. And then, almost casually, he points toward Hagia Sophia, its silhouette massive against the moon. There, he says, empires stacked themselves higher than walls. You know the event, of course, 1453, when Mehmed II's cannons finally broke the city walls and Constantinople fell. The guide shrugs. People think walls are protection. Sometimes they're only invitations. You can still smell the soot, even though centuries stand between you and that siege. In your imagination, smoke crawls upward from shattered stone, mingling with tonight's lamp haze until you can't separate one from the other. The city doesn't let you forget. It rubs your face in its past until you taste it, yet the layers aren't all blood and conquest. A turn down a side alley reveals an old Roman cistern, cool air seeping up like breath from underground. You descend a few steps, and the temperature drops immediately, a damp chill licking your skin. The air smells of moss and minerals, like a cave that just swallowed rain. Down here, pillars vanish into dark water that reflects the moon through cracks above. And, here's the strange fact, 2 Medusa heads lie carved at the bases of columns, turned sideways and upside down, as if placed there just to confuse future gawkers. Why sideways, you ask? The guide shrugs. To defy evil, or because it fit better that way. Historians still debate whether superstition or convenience was the real reason. Either way, you feel the goosebumps ripple across your arms. When you climb back, up, the warmth of the surface hits like stepping out of an over-air-conditioned movie theater. Above ground, the night hasn't paused. A caravan passes, bells jingling against the slow groan of wheels. Spices spill their perfume into the dark. Cumin, cinnamon, pepper, sharp enough to make your nose twitch. It's like walking past a medieval food court. If food courts smelled less like fried oil and more like entire continents crammed into sacks. 2 men argue beside the caravan. "You cheated me," one growls. "You can't cheat a man who can't count," the other fires back. The bystanders snicker. One nudges you, saying, "This argument's older than the city itself. Above it all, the city is layered not just in stone, but in voices. Muezzins call from minarets, overlapping like waves on a shore. Bells from hidden Christian churches still ring faintly, their sound tucked into the corners of the night. Even the seagulls add a shriek here and there, because seagulls apparently don't believe in curfews. Modern comparison? It's like living inside 20 tabs on your browser, all playing different YouTube videos at once. Somehow your brain accepts it. Somehow the city thrives on it. You climb a hill, legs burning slightly, and the guide points to Galata Tower looming in the distance. Its stone walls catch the moon like pale armor. He whispers about Hezarfen Ahmed Çelebi, who, according to legend, strapped wings to his arms in the 17th century and glided from that tower across the Bosphorus, landing on the Asian side. First man to fly, he says. Or first man to fall gracefully. You grin. Basically the Ottoman right brother minus the brother. Wind whips across the hill, cool and sharp, tugging your robe. The smell of the sea intensifies, salt threading into your lungs until you taste it. From here, the city spreads like a mosaic. Domes glinting, minarets pricking the sky, alleys curling into the dark like question marks. It's dizzying almost too much. A layered cake of stone and smoke, history and rumor. The guide looks at you, eyes narrowing. Every city has layers, but here, they are closer together. Too close. You touch one, you feel all. And in that moment you realize the restless groan of palace doors isn't confined to marble halls. It's here too, stitched into walls, stones, water and smoke. The city itself seems to brace, as if another layer is about to press down on the pile. You linger on the hilltop, chilled by the breeze, warmed by the thought that you are walking inside a place that never truly sleeps, only shifts, restless, waiting. And somewhere below, in the labyrinth of layers, a sound stirs that promises to pull you deeper still. The wind still lingers on your skin when another sound threads itself through the layered night. A drum, low and steady, like a heartbeat stitched into wood. It thumps along narrow streets, bouncing against stone facades, tugging you forward. At first it feels faint, almost like someone left a washing machine on in the distance. But no, it's deliberate, purposeful. The Suhoor drummer announcing pre-dawn meals during Ramadan. You follow it down twisting alleys, your breath frosting lightly as the air cools near a fountain. The scent of rosewater drifts from a jug being rinsed, mixing with the sharper smoke of kebab skewers still glowing on embers. The city isn't asleep, it's awake in a different register. Laughter seeps from windows. The clatter of bowls carries into the street. And above it all, that drum insists, wake, eat, prepare before the fast begins. The drummer himself is wiry, his coat patched, his mustache proud. He belts a rhyme between beats, wake neighbors, wake, fill your bowls before daybreak. A boy leans from a balcony and yells, play faster, uncle, my father still snores. Without missing a beat, the drummer shoots back, then your father is fasting from sleep as well as food. The crowd chuckles. You can't help but grin. The sound isn't alone. Lanterns bob down streets as neighbors carry trays, delivering sweets or borrowed spices. The light paints the stone walls honey gold, even as shadows cling stubbornly. From a distance, it looks like fireflies took a wrong turn and decided to colonize the city. The rhythm of Ramadan nights isn't just domestic. Sometimes it tips into festival. As you drift closer to a square, you hear clapping, laughter, the high wail of a knee flute. Children dash past you, their feet bare against the stones, clutching candied almonds in sticky fists. The smell of syrup wafts up, sugary, nutty, dangerously tempting if you had to fast through the day yourself. You probably wouldn't survive here. Forget hunger. You'd trip over your own shoes trying to chase a halva cart. In the square, performers spin with whirling skirts, colors blurring into a cyclone under torchlight. The crowd claps along, the rhythm hypnotic. One man leans over to you and says proudly, "Our nights are longer than our days. Ramadan is when the city truly breathes." You nod because it's true. The air vibrates with something more than festivity. It's devotion threaded with mischief, prayer layered with performance. Above it all, lamps strung between minarets spell out glowing words in Arabic. The tradition, mahya, is as old as the 16th century. Tiny oil lamps arranged like constellations to form phrases. Tonight says, patience is light. The words hover in the night sky like a celestial billboard. Only difference, no neon, no advertising, just a sermon written in fire. You tilt your head, imagining earlier centuries when these lights were first introduced. Some historians claim Sultan Ahmed I encouraged the practice during his reign. Others say it emerged later. Historians still debate who lit the first mahya, and whether it was meant purely as devotion or as a subtle reminder of imperial generosity. Either way, it works. You feel small and hushed, craning up at those hovering words, but hushed moments rarely last long here. A storyteller pops up in the square, his voice carrying over the clamor. He recounts the siege of Vienna, 1683, with theatrical pauses. Our soldiers dug trenches, our cannons thundered, yet the walls stood. His voice rises, eyes shining. Then he sighs. But what we did not expect was croissants. The children blink. Croissants? He grins, leaning forward. Yes, the bakers of Vienna, working before dawn, heard our digging. They raised the alarm. That is why you eat buttery crescents today. You mutter, basically espionage by pastry. The crowd roars with laughter. One boy shouts, "Tell it again." Another man argues, no, it was not like that at all. The beauty is, truth hardly matters here. The story itself has a pulse. The pulse runs through you too. You wander further, the drumbeat weaving in and out of your steps. In an alley, you find a man ladling boza, fermented millet drink into cups. The smell is tangy, sour-sweet, a bit like bread dough that decided to run away from home. He hands you a cup, froth spilling down the sides. First time? He asks. You sip cautiously. It tastes like yogurt met beer in an awkward handshake. Not bad, you admit. Not bad? He laughs, clutching his belly. This drink conquered. Winters before armies did. Children parade past singing little verses, their voices shrill with excitement. One melody is half lullaby, half marching tune, a sound you'd expect from kids in line at a candy shop, rather than in the middle of a centuries-old fast. Their candles sputter, wax dripping down onto bare fingers, but no one seems to mind. The night deepens. Cool air brushes the sweat off your neck as you wander back toward a mosque courtyard. The stone feels alive beneath your feet, cooling as if storing the day's heat in its bones. Inside, men recline on carpets, murmuring verses, their voices low and steady. The scent of oud wood curls upward in slow smoke, mingling with the faint sweetness of dates still clinging to trays. It strikes you then. Ramadan nights aren't about stillness. They're about movement, voices, music, lanterns, drumming, about keeping the city awake together. If the day is for fasting, the night is for binding. The guide reappears as if he never really left. He nods at the drummers circling back through the streets. You hear them? Without them, people would oversleep. They are our alarm clocks. You chuckle. Alarm clocks with rhythm. Better than any bell, he replies. Bells wake only the ears, drums wake the whole body. Your body hums with it now. The thump of the drum, the clink of cups, the chant of prayers, the sway of lanterns. The city has turned itself into a giant orchestra, and you are somewhere in its pit, half listener, half player. And as the sky edges toward the first thin silver of dawn, the sounds don't fade. They tighten, compressing into urgency. The drummer pounds harder, voices call louder, bowls scrape faster. You feel the whole city inhaling together before the long day ahead. And somewhere behind it all, beneath the layers and music, you think you hear another sound, the groan of a palace door pushing wider, waiting for night's energy to spill into morning. The last lanterns are dimming when you slip into a quieter street, the beat of the Ramadan drummer fading into memory. The air is softer here, cool stone sighing under the first brush of dawn, and you catch the faintest murmur. A voice, stretched, thin as thread, reciting something almost swallowed by silence. You lean closer. It's not prayer exactly, not song exactly, but something in between. A fragment of verse carried like contraband in the folds of night. You follow it toward a shadowed archway where an old man, cross-legged on a mat, rocks. Gently as he mutters lines from memory, his voice rasps like parchment rubbed against stone. The smell of damp books clings to him, though there isn't a single volume in sight. He notices you watching, smiles faintly, and asks, "Do you know how many poems our empire forgot?" You shake your head. He taps his temple. "More than I can hold here, but fewer than I lost here." He points to the sky. The city is waking, but he is still rooted in another time. He tells you of poets once summoned to courts, their stanzas gilded with calligraphy, their words copied on silk and pressed into marble. Some verses celebrated victories like the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, when Mehmed II rode through the gates and changed the world. Others, he insists, were never written for sultans at all. They were for bakers, fishermen, even the watchmen who drummed the hours. But most, he sighs, slipped away with the smoke of their first recital. As he speaks, the smell of bread baking nearby teases your nose, flatbreads puffing in clay ovens, crusts blistering like tiny suns. It mixes with the metallic tang of morning, air and the faint sweetness of spilled molasses at the edge of a shop. It's enough to make your stomach argue out loud. The old man chuckles. See, even your hunger makes more noise than our lost poets. A boy runs past clutching a scrap of parchment. The elder calls him over. Read it. The boy squints, stumbles through a verse about spring blossoms and riverbanks. Then he giggles. It doesn't even rhyme. The elder smacks his knee. That's because you're reading Ottoman Turkish with modern eyes. The rhyme is hiding. You mutter, like my grades in math class. The boy grins at you. Maybe your teacher was a forgotten poet too. The elder grows serious again. He recalls that when Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent wasn't commanding armies, he was penning poems under the name Muhibi. You can almost picture the world's most powerful man, pausing between sieges to scribble verses about roses and love. And yet, centuries later, many of his works are tucked in dusty collections hardly anyone opens. Historians still debate, the old man adds, whether poetry softened rulers or sharpened them. Was it escape or strategy? The alley feels thicker with meaning now. You hear footsteps in the distance, scholars heading toward madrasas, traders rolling carts into the bazaar. But in this pocket, time is stalling. The elder hums a melody under his breath, almost like he's summoning the ghost of words lost. He speaks of Medar, storytellers who wove rhymes into performance, their voices stretching long into the night. They could slip satire into verse, mocking officials while pretending it was just poetry. Like medieval stand-up comics, minus the microphone, plus the risk of exile. He leans toward you. Did you know some verses were banned? You blink. He explains that in certain reigns, poems hinting at dissent or drunkenness were burned. But people memorized them anyway, passing lines in whispers, scribbling on scraps of paper tucked inside shoes. Imagine carrying rebellion in your sandal. Beats. Carrying gum in your backpack. The boy interrupts again, tugging your sleeve. Or want to hear my favorite? Without waiting, he belts out a playful rhyme about a rooster who refused to crow until he was bribed with sesame seeds. The elder groans, that is not a verse, that is gossip from the chicken coop. But you laugh because honestly, you'd stream a podcast like that. The morning brightens. The dome of a nearby mosque gleams faintly as sunlight brushes its tiles, and the call to prayer floats over rooftops, layering itself onto the elder's muttered lines. Sound on sound, verse on verse, city on city. It makes you wonder how many words are buried under the cobblestones, lost between tongues, forgotten in translations that didn't quite fit. The elder finally rises, joints cracking like old doors. He presses your shoulder lightly. If you remember one thing, he says, remember that silence eats faster than fire. Words live only when spoken. Then he turns, disappearing down an alley that swallows him whole. You stand still, listening. The clatter of carts is louder now, the smell of spice, pepper, saffron, cumin wafting from the bazaar. Cats weave between your ankles, tails flicking like punctuation marks. Yet beneath the morning bustle, you swear you can still hear a faint hum of those forgotten verses, lingering like breath on a cold window. And as you drift back toward the larger streets, past walls stained with both soot and sunlight, you feel it again. That subtle tug, as though the city is trying to press something into your hands before it vanishes. Something half memory, half warning. Something waiting at the palace doors. The streets are filling now, sunlight slipping down minarets like spilled honey. Your feet ache from chasing poets and drummers, so when you stumble upon a fountain glimmering in the square, it feels like the city itself just handed you a seat and a sip. The water arcs in clean silver lines, falling into a marble basin carved with tulips and vines, the surface rippling like someone breathed across polished glass. You lean close, cupping your hands into the cold stream, and the shock of it against your skin makes you gasp. After hours of smoky coffee houses, spice-thick alleys, and the crackle of bread ovens, this water tastes like an apology. A man sitting on the fountain's edge nods at you. His beard is flecked with grey, his robes neatly folded, and in his hand is a small brass cup he refills again and again from the spout. Best water in the quarter, he says, tapping the stone. You answer with a dripping grin. Definitely. 5 stars on the hydration app. He laughs, then gestures toward an inscription curling along the fountain's base. Endowed by Sultan Ahmed himself. he explains, voice low and proud, to remind us that even kings must pour generosity. The sunlight catches on the stonework, highlighting the delicate carving of tulips and Quranic verses. The marble holds a coolness that contradicts the growing heat. You notice the sounds layering around the fountain, the plink of water echoing. Inside the basin, the thud of donkey hooves clopping nearby, the shouts of a vendor arranging pyramids of figs, and a woman clattering pots as she fills them. The fountain isn't just decoration. It's a hub, a pause button for everyone rushing through the morning. Children dart in with tin cups, splashing more on each other than they drink. One boy pretends the spout is a dragon's mouth and makes hissing noises until his sister smacks him on the ear. He protests, "It's breathing fire." She points out the obvious. "That's water, you donkey." Their laughter rings out brighter than the fountain itself. The grey-bearded man beside you sighs. People forget, but fountains like this were the lifeblood of the city. Before pipes reached homes, this is where you came. Before work, after prayer in summer heat so heavy it could crush the air. He cups his hands too, letting the water drip through his fingers like pearls. During sieges, fountains became symbols. The people feared running dry more than running out of bread. Your brain flashes back to history class, remembering the siege of Constantinople in 1453. You say, so basically, water was Wi-Fi. Lose it, and the whole city collapses. The man chuckles, "Yes, except you cannot drink Wi-Fi." You shrug, "Have you tasted hotel Wi-Fi?" As you drink again, he shares a lesser-known story. There was once a sultan so obsessed with fountains that he funded dozens in one year, each more ornate than the last. One was rumored to have been cooled with blocks of ice hauled from the mountains, so its water was cold even in the height of summer. Historians still debate, he adds with a smirk, whether it was true innovation or just royal bragging rights. The marble seat beneath you chills your legs, even as the sun warms. Your shoulders. The air smells of both dust and wet stone, a strange balance that feels calming after the spice-thick markets. A breeze stirs, carrying hints of jasmine from a nearby garden, and you imagine what it must have been like centuries ago. Weary guards, pausing for a sip, travelers rinsing road dust, women filling clay jugs while gossip swirled thicker than the water. A group of janissaries, young, sharp-eyed soldiers, stride past, their boots heavy on the cobblestones. One bends to splash his face in the fountain, shaking off droplets that glitter like quicksilver. You imagine it, soldiers pausing before marching into battles that would decide empires, their reflections trembling in the same basin you're leaning over now. The weight of continuity presses down, the sense that the water is less a drink and more a witness. You lean back, staring at the fountain's canopy, painted wooden eaves patterned in turquoise and gold, their colors faded but stubborn. You think of modern fast food chains trying to design Instagrammable bathrooms, and you can't help but laugh. Ottoman sultans were doing it first with fountains. A voice interrupts your thoughts. A young woman balancing a jug greets the old man. He nods respectfully. She glances at you, smirks, and asks, "First time drinking Empire water?" You grin. "Does it come in sparkling?" She shakes her head, amused. "Only flowing." She dips her jug, muscles straining, and as the vessel fills, she murmurs, "May it carry blessings to your lips." It's said so simply, but it clings like the aftertaste of honey. The square grows busier. A vendor roasts chestnuts nearby, their smoke curling into the clean scent of water. A fiddler begins tuning, notes bending like a cat stretching awake. You close your eyes, and for a moment the fountain's splash merges with the music, turning into something like rhythm, like verse. You remember the old man's words from the alley. Silence eats faster than fire. Maybe fountains, too, were poems that survived because they never stopped speaking. The grey-bearded man finally stands, brushing dust from his robe. "Rest well, traveler." The fountain gives you pause, but the city is never still. He bows his head, then disappears into the crowd. You sit longer, letting the water's steady plink stitch calm into your bones. And just when you think of rising, you catch sight of something carved faintly into the marble, almost erased by time, a scratched verse, half legible, hidden beneath the official inscription. You lean close, tracing it with your finger. Words linger here too, not lost but waiting, caught in stone like breath before a sentence. And as the fountain keeps speaking, you know the city will nudge you onward, toward whatever waits behind those palace doors that never seem to stay closed. You peel yourself away from the fountain's marble, droplets still clinging to your fingertips, and drift into an alley that narrows like a funnel, guiding you deeper into the city's chest. The air shifts, cool shadow replacing warm sunlight, the smell of wet laundry hanging overhead mixing with something sharper, like cloves ground too fine. Every sound amplifies here, the scrape of sandals on stone, a cough bouncing between walls, even your own heartbeat pattering faster than you'd like. At first you think you're alone. Then you notice him, a man leaning against a doorway, dressed, simply in a dark coat, one ear oddly tilted toward the street as though catching notes you can't hear. His gaze is down, but his posture is all alertness, like a cat pretending to nap, but ready to pounce. "Thirst quenched?" he asks without looking up. His voice is dry but not unkind. You hesitate, then nod. "Best water in the quarter," you joke, echoing the old man from before. The stranger chuckles softly. "Yes, but water flows easy. Words, not always." There's something unsettling in how he says it, and you glance around, half expecting to spot others hiding in the shadows. Instead, you notice the tiny details, the gleam of copper pots stacked in a stall, the faint smell of boiled chickpeas from a kettle, the flutter of pigeons scattering when a cart rattles by. All normal. And yet the man feels out of place, like a missing page tucked back into the wrong book. He tilts his head, ear cocked again. "You hear the city, don't you?" You shrug, playing along. "Mostly donkeys and people arguing about bread prices." He smiles faintly. "No, beneath that. The things people think they whisper." You laugh, nervous. "So you're, what, a human podcast subscription?" His reply is slow, closer to the Empire's ear. The phrase sticks to you like wet cloth. You've heard enough stories to... Guess what he means: spies, informants, listeners who fed the sultans with street rumors. The Ottoman court didn't just rely on letters and envoys. Sometimes the empire leaned closer, placing its ear against the city itself. You recall a famous historical scene when Sultan Murad IV, notorious for his bans, walked the streets in disguise to catch lawbreakers himself. People whispered that he executed smokers and drinkers on sight, that taverns turned silent graves because of his nightly strolls. And here before you, this stranger seems like a leftover echo of that tradition, a listener among the people, blending in so completely you wouldn't notice him unless you tripped over his shadow. The alley narrows further, pressing you closer to him. He shifts and you catch the scent of leather and old ink. "Did you know," he murmurs, "there were scribes who filled notebooks not with decrees, but with overheard gossip? Markets, baths, fountains, mosques, 1,000 ears funneled into..." A single voice. His tone drops lower. "Some of those books still exist. Others..." He lifts his hand, letting it fall. "Gone, like smoke." A shiver laces your spine. You picture those vanished books, entire cityscapes erased because someone decided words were too dangerous. It feels strangely modern. You think of deleted text chains, of apps that promise vanishing messages but always leave you paranoid someone screenshot it. Maybe nothing ever really disappears. The stranger turns suddenly, eyes sharp now. "Tell me something. What did the old man say at the fountain?" His question lands heavy, like he already knows the answer. You hesitate, then admit, "That water flows. But words survive only if spoken." He nods slowly, as though ticking a box, in some invisible ledger. "Good, you listened." There's a pause, broken only by a cat yowling from a rooftop. The sunlight filters back in here, fractured into sharp lines by the slats of wooden balconies overhead. Dust motes spin like tiny lanterns in the air. The heat returns, sticky against your skin. You test the waters with humor. "So, are you gonna report me for bad poetry?" His mouth twitches. "Only if it rhymes with treason." He steps forward, guiding you deeper down the passage. The walls close in, stone damp to the touch. The palace keeps an ear in every corner, he whispers, almost like he's confiding a bedtime secret. At the coffee house, the mosque courtyard, even by the baklava trays, people forget how sharp sugar becomes when it slices into a report. You glance sidelong. That sounds exhausting. Exhausting, he chuckles softly. No, necessary. Without ears, a ruler is deaf, and a deaf ruler is dead. His words stir images of courts collapsing, empires toppling because whispers weren't caught in time. You think of the Janissary revolts, when mutinous soldiers once marched straight into the hippodrome, shouting grievances loud enough to bring down viziers. The stranger notices your silence and adds, historians still debate whether those uprisings were planned speeches or accidents born from unchecked murmurs. The idea unsettles you, that history itself may hinge not on banners or cannons, but on the volume of complaints muttered in back alleys. The alley spills you out into a small courtyard. The smell of bread lingers here too, but sharper. Flatbreads baking against hot stones, steam venting through cracks. The stranger pauses by a shuttered shop, his ear tilted once more toward the wall. You strain to hear, but catch only faint clinks, maybe dice rolling, maybe cups shifting. He murmurs, "See? Even now they play, they gamble, they plot. You don't need eyes, only an ear. You can't help but poke. Doesn't that get boring? Just listening all day?" His gaze flickers toward you, unreadable. You'd be surprised. A single secret can weigh more than gold. For a moment you imagine him hearing things never written down, plans to smuggle silk, the forbidden laughter of lovers, a soldier's doubts before marching east. Secrets pressed into the city's walls like flowers between pages. You try one last joke. "So you're like those targeted ads, except instead of selling me shoes, you're selling the Sultan my business." He laughs genuinely this time. "Perhaps, but ads do not carry heads on pikes when displeased." The courtyard quiets, broken only by the fountain's trickle in the distance and the faint caw of crows. He shifts his stance, and for the first time, his posture slackens, almost like he's letting you go. "You should move on," he says, glancing toward the street that leads uphill, where the palace walls rise like a fortress of shadows and promise. Ears can only take you so far. The eyes are waiting. His words hang in the air, heavier than stone. You step away, feeling his gaze at your back, though when you glance over your shoulder, he's gone, like he dissolved into the noise of the city. Another ear swallowed by whispers. And as you follow the sloping road, the palace doors glint in the morning sun, daring you to discover what those watchful eyes will reveal. You take the incline slow, as if your legs know the climb isn't just stone and gravity, but something stickier, expectation pressing from above. The palace walls appear closer with each step, pale and radiant under the late morning sun, yet never losing that fortress edge that tells you, politely but firmly, you don't belong inside. The air grows warmer here, sharp with the smell of lime-washed plaster baking in the heat, mingled with roasted sesame seeds tumbling from a street vendor's tray. A breeze carries the faint ring of hammered copper, then dies, leaving you sweating, in your own stillness. And then you notice it, not eyes exactly, but threads. Invisible, but you swear you feel them. The way the women at the bread stall suddenly hush when you pass, their laughter smothered mid-breath. The way a man adjusting the tassel of his fez glances too long, like his gaze is more report than curiosity. It feels like walking into a chat group where everyone's online but no one's typing. Creepy, right? You clear your throat trying to shake the sensation. "Okay," you mutter under your breath. "Who ordered the invisible spiders?" No one answers, of course, but the silence feels rehearsed. That's when a boy, maybe 12, brushes past you with a bundle of string. The cords are bright red, rough against your sleeve, and you watch him dart toward a shaded corner where two older men squat, knotting ropes together. The boy grins. "Want to help?" You raise an eyebrow. "Depends. Is this going to end with me tied to a donkey cart?" One of the men laughs, a dry bark. "No, we bind stories, not ankles." You lean closer, and that's when you see it. The strings connect not to each other, but to little scraps of paper. tiny notes folded and tied, fluttering in the faint breeze like a secret laundry line. The men tug and knot, tying names to places, complaints to favors, debts to promises. A map not on parchment but in twine. The boy explains, quick and eager. Every knot's a bond. A baker owes flour, a sailor owes silver, a cousin owes silence. We track it here. It's both absurd and genius, like an Ottoman version of LinkedIn, except instead of endorsements for Excel skills, you get a knot reminding you to return your neighbor's goat. You test the waters. So, this is like a giant to-do. List? The older man shakes his head. It is memory. Without bonds we are nothing. The empire runs on promises, not walls. You feel a shiver because suddenly the invisible threads tugging at you earlier make sense. They're not just in your head. They're real, just not visible unless you know where to look. A vendor nearby slaps dough against hot metal, the hiss loud in the silence, and you smell charred bread, sweetened faintly with molasses. You hear hoofbeats again, sharper now. A soldier's horse passing, its iron shoes clanging against the cobblestones. The boy lowers his voice, conspiratorial. Even sultans are knotted here. Marriage is a rope, so is war. And he's right. You remember one of the most famous historical knots, the alliance forged when Suleiman the Magnificent married Hurrem Sultan, a concubine turned queen. It wasn't just romance. It was a cord that bound political factions, reshaped power, and tilted courtly balance for decades. But the boy adds something stranger. There was once a law not about soldiers or taxes, but about silk ribbons. Too many knots, the Sultan feared, meant too many secret bonds. You blink. Wait. A law against string, he nods. Against colors, against knots. Some said silk threads carried hidden pacts. A ribbon on a door could mean a debt or a prayer or a rebellion. You can't help but laugh. So basically the empire invented passive-aggressive post-it notes? The man with the rough hands smirks. Yes, and just as dangerous. The heat presses down harder, sticky on your neck, as though even the air wants you tangled in its cords. A cat curls near the notes, paw batting lazily at the strings, unaware of the weight they carry. You imagine a single tug could ripple outward, shaking friendships, trades, even wars. The boy asks you suddenly, "What bond do you carry?" You stammer. Overdue library books? He grins wide, like he caught you in a trap. Then you two are knotted. Everyone is. And in that moment, you feel the weight of it. How cities are less bricks and stone and more invisible ties. How even silence is a kind of thread looped between strangers. You think of modern life, where your phone buzzes with group chats, work, chains, unread messages. You're basically tangled in 21st century twine already. These people just had the audacity to hang theirs on display. The older man cuts a string suddenly, sharp with his knife. The paper flutters to the ground. "Some bonds must break," he says flatly. The boy doesn't smile this time. The air chills despite the heat, as though you've just watched something more final than it appeared. You want to ask what note that was, but the man tucks the knife away and nods toward the hill. Go. Others wait, not with ears, not with... to knots with eyes? The words echo the stranger's warning, and you realize these bonds, the unseen ones, aren't meant to hold you here. They're meant to prepare you for what's ahead. You step away, the scent of sesame bread fading, the red strings swaying behind you like quiet flags. The road tilts up again, and at the crest, sunlight glints against the palace gates, where you sense that the city's gaze, sharp, unblinking, has already fixed itself upon you. The climb finally eases, and when you crest the last rise, the air feels different, lighter, tinged with coolness, like the city itself has exhaled. A faint blush of dawn, pale pink bleeding into the blue, smudges the horizon above the palace. Gates. It's early still, yet not the kind of early where the streets are empty. This is the hour when the city stretches, rubs its eyes, and pretends it hasn't been awake all night. The smell hits you first. Bread fresh from an oven somewhere. Deep in the palace kitchens, yeasty and warm, laced with the sharpness of wood smoke. Then another layer, roses. Buckets of them, freshly cut. Their scent carried over the walls like someone spilled perfume into the sky. A rooster crows absurdly loud, as if auditioning for the role of official dawn announcer, and a guard nearby mutters something. In Turkish, that probably translates to, "Shut up." You glance at the gates, they glint gold, not from actual gold, but from sunlight catching polished brass, a trick of architecture meant to impress and intimidate at the same time. You whisper, "It's like Photoshop, but with metal," and a passing porter carrying firewood snorts, clearly amused. "First time here?" he asks. "Is it that obvious?" Everyone stares. First Blush does that. He jerks his chin toward the skyline. "Wait. Just wait." And you do. The sky shifts again. The pink deepens. Threads of orange creep in, and suddenly the domes of the palace gleam as though painted in molten copper. Even the seagulls circling overhead look gilded, for a moment before their wings turn back to plain white. It's dazzling, the kind of light that makes you squint and still not want to look away. The porter sets down his bundle and leans on it like a walking stick. Once, when the city was under siege, dawn like this broke. 1453, the last emperor of Byzantium looked at the sky and said it was God's paintbrush. He chuckles. Then the cannons fired. History doesn't pause for pretty skies. You nod, remembering the story well. The great fall of Constantinople, cannons thundering, the end of one empire and the birth of another. It's strange how the light of day can outlast empires, showing up like nothing happened. But the porter adds a quieter note. Not all dawns are remembered. There was one, the year of the great comet. The sky turned red, they said, red like blood. People swore it meant the Sultan would die. He didn't, but his favorite horse did. You blink. That's anticlimactic, he shrugs. The horse was very famous. You can't help laughing, but his face stays serious, and you realize he means it. Bonds of men and beasts, palaces and stables, all of it matters here. Historians still debate whether that comet was just coincidence or an omen woven into the empire's fabric. Another sound joins the morning. Drums, faint at first, then growing. A soft thud, steady, like a heartbeat you can hear through the stone. The porter perks up. Mater, you tilt your head. The marching band? More than that. The oldest of them all. The Ottoman military band, you realize. The Meta, whose booming rhythms once echoed across battlefields, terrifying enemies long before the first sword clashed. And now, they're rehearsing. At dawn. Because apparently nothing wakes you up like a wall of kettle drums. The beat vibrates through the ground, up your legs, into your chest. It's not gentle. It's thunder in silk slippers. You mutter, "This is basically the Empire's version of blasting your car stereo at 6 a.m. The porter grins. Exactly. Other guards and servants gather, half listening, half going about their duties. A boy in uniform carries in trays of steaming milk. A woman sprinkles rosewater on the cobblestones. It smells sharp and sweet, fighting the odor of sweat and horses. Her cat slinks between ankles, tail high, then meows at you like you owe it breakfast. Someone nearby mutters, "Every dawn, new eyes." And you remember the warning. Ears have had their turn. Now it's the eyes watching. The palace windows flash. With sunlight, and for a moment you swear you see movement. Curtains twitching, shadows shifting. Eyes behind glass, measuring, weighing. You whisper to the porter, "Do they always watch like this?" He chuckles. "They don't always blink, if that's what you mean." A chill runs over you despite the warmth. You take a breath, focusing. On the smells, the comforting bread, the roses, even the horse dung nearby, because they ground you in something real, something less piercing than those invisible gazes. Still, dawn has its softness too. A serving girl pauses to hand you a piece of simmet, the sesame bread ring still hot, its seeds crackling. You bite into it, the crunch loud in your ears, and she smiles faintly before disappearing into the bustle. It's a strange balance here. Beauty wrapped around suspicion, music wrapped around silence. The first blush of dawn gives everything. Fair glow, but you can feel the weight beneath it, as if the light is less about beauty and more about revealing what was hidden in the night. You turn toward the palace again, gates towering and the drums thudding louder now, joined by high-pitched Zernas. The air quivers with sound, colors sharpening, and for a moment it feels less like a city and more like a stage. And you, very much, are standing in the spotlight. The day has begun. The eyes are awake, and you realize that whatever waits beyond those gates is no longer content to stay hidden. The drums still linger in your chest, even as their echoes fade behind you. The palace gates gleam brighter now in the morning sun, but strangely, instead of moving forward, you find yourself turning back, your steps tracing downhill. There's no order shouted, no guard forcing you away, just a tug, as though the city itself insists on showing you its other face before you dare step inside. The air is cooler in the shadows of the descending streets. You catch the faint tang of damp stone mixed with soap from buckets splashed onto stoops, the scent of stale figs wafting from a cart left uncovered overnight. Laundry, which a few hours ago had loomed above like sleeping flags, now stirs in, the breeze slapping lightly against the lines with the sound of slow applause. Back already, a bread seller teases, arranging simmet rings into careful towers. His smile is crooked, but his eyes measure you. Just checking if gravity still works, you answer, and he chuckles, tossing a sesame seed at you like a coin. Further down, the bustle is subtler than the palace courtyard. No drums here, just the sound of broom bristles scratching cobblestones and the occasional cough from someone lighting a clay pipe. A rooster, late to his job, crows indignantly from a windowsill, sounding less like an alarm and more like a kid demanding attention in class. You pause at a small fountain, water spilling over its lip with a hush. Two women fill copper pitchers, their bangles clinking like distant bells. One glances at you, then murmurs to her friend. The friend laughs softly, covering her mouth. You pretend not to notice, though you can't help thinking, so this is basically the Ottoman version of being roasted on Twitter. The morning grows brighter, but the city doesn't hurry. It stretches slowly, like a cat deciding whether or not to acknowledge your existence. A boy with ink-stained fingers nearly collides with you, clutching a stack of parchment. He steadies himself, eyes wide. "Where are you running?" you ask. "To the Madris. Lessons begin soon." "Late?" He winces. "Always." He dashes on, the smell of ink trailing faintly, and you're left thinking of all the students who once carried words like weapons or shields through these very lanes. Some would grow into poets, others into scribes, and a few into the kind of listeners you met in the alleys earlier. History weighs heavy here, even in its quieter corners. You recall the year of 1826, when dawn didn't bring bread and roses, but gunpowder and blood, the auspicious incident when the Janissaries were crushed, their barracks burned. That too had begun with morning routines, with men thinking the day was ordinary until it wasn't. Yet this same street also carries gentler memories. Did you know coffee, the empire's most beloved fuel, was once banned by decree? Not for health, not for taste, but because coffee houses gathered too many sharp tongues in one room. Men plotting revolution over cups thick as tar. Imagine banning Starbucks not because of caffeine jitters, but because the Wi-Fi was too revolutionary. Historians still debate whether those bans ever truly worked, or if coffee just made the gossip stronger. A gust of wind sneaks between buildings, cool against your skin, tugging at your sleeves. You follow it down a narrower lane where shadows nestle like secrets. The smell shifts again. Damp straw, goat droppings, and somewhere a stew already simmering, cumin rising rich and warm into the air. An old man sits on a low stool, feeding pigeons with crumbs. He looks up as you pass. You've seen the gates? Yes. And yet you return here. Maybe I wasn't ready. He smiles, toothless but not unkind. No one ever is. The pigeons flutter, their wings brushing the air like paper fans. You think of how eyes had followed you above, and ears before that, and how perhaps even these birds are trained to notice. It would almost be funny if it weren't so possible. You move again, deeper, and find yourself at a small square where the morning has gathered into a hush. A dervish sweeps the flagstones, each stroke slow, deliberate, almost meditative. Dust rises, catching the sunlight in tiny golden motes. He hums under his breath, A low tune, maybe prayer, maybe memory. The calm presses into you. You realize that after the thunder of drums and glare of brass, this silence feels heavier, like returning from a festival to an empty room where the absence is loud. Do you hear it? The dervish asks without looking at you. Hear what? The city breathing. And when you close your eyes, you do. A cart creaks in the distance, sandals shuffle, pigeons coo, water drips into a basin. All faint, all ordinary. Yet together they form a rhythm, a softer meter, not of war, but of survival. You open your eyes, and the man has already turned away. The sunlight angles sharper now, sliding between rooftops, gilding the uneven stones. At your feet. Warmth gathers on your shoulders, while coolness lingers in the shaded cracks. You take a slow breath, realizing that this quiet return is less about retreating and more about listening differently. The city has shown you its bright, staged dawn. Now it offers the ordinary, the overlooked, the part no chronicler records but which holds everything together. And as you step back into the street, you sense that this too is a test, because what waits behind those palace gates will be louder, brighter, heavier still. This calm is a pause, a deep inhale before the exhale, and soon that breath will be released. The hush of the city still clings to you, like the last breath before waking. Morning light stretches further now, slanting between domes and chimneys, gilding the uneven stones beneath your feet. The palace gates remain behind, yet the air around. You feel as though their weight has followed. Every step you take is softened by shadows, but sharpened by echoes. Echoes that don't stop at walls or centuries. The sound of a broom scratching cobblestone fades, replaced by the faint tap of a cobbler's hammer from an alley where leather smells sharp, oiled alive. Somewhere a cat yowls, offended that its breakfast wasn't served on time. You smile, thinking how some things never change. Cats, deadlines, and neighbors who sweep dust into your path just as you walk by. Eternal constants. As you move, the past seems to fold over itself. The air grows warmer, but a shiver still slides over your arms, as though the stones themselves remember too much. A merchant calls out, his voice stretching through the morning mist. Fresh melons, sweet as Eden. You pause. This early? Better early than eaten by flies. Fair point. You nod and keep walking. The smell of those melons lingers, honey-rich, mixing oddly with the tang of horse dung and iron from a blacksmith's forge further on. Sparks fly in bursts of gold, fading before they hit the ground. Tiny meteors rehearsing for a sky that hasn't darkened yet. And that's when the stories begin to crowd in. The streets don't tell them aloud. They press them into you, like damp cloth against skin. You remember 1453 when cannons thundered against these very walls, and the city's name changed forever. Everyone knows of that siege, of Mehmet II riding through as Constantinople turned into Istanbul, but fewer mention the quieter hours after. The echo of footsteps as the conqueror wandered Hagia Sophia, whispering not triumph, but a verse. The spider weaves the curtains in the palace of the Caesars. The owl calls the watches in the tower of Afrasiab. History doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sighs. Another memory surfaces, less famous, nearly hidden. A time when tulips became obsession, their bulbs worth fortunes. Men gambled estates on colors no one had seen yet, waiting like day traders for petals to open. And when the frenzy crashed, some swore the flowers themselves had laughed. Historians still debate whether that mania was mere fashion or an early stock bubble with Ottoman flair. Either way, tulips still bend in the morning breeze, blissfully unaware of bankruptcies they once caused. A chill brushes your neck, though the sun is already climbing. You pass beneath an arch where pigeons scatter, their wings clapping loud as sudden applause. One feather spirals down, lands against your sleeve. You keep it, though you don't know why. Maybe as proof that even the city leaves breadcrumbs for those who listen. A boy plays a reed flute on the corner, the notes thin, wavering but insistent. He catches your eye. Want to learn? He asks, holding the instrument out. I'd scare the pigeons, you reply. They're already scared. You laugh but don't take it. Still, the music follows you, threading into the air like smoke. And then comes the thought, maybe you've been walking not forward, but through layers stacked like sheets of glass, some polished, some cracked. You glimpse one century in the fore corner of your eye, another in the angle of a roof tile, a third in the way morning sunlight flares against brass. The cobbles beneath you feel warmer now, though patches of shadow still cling cool as damp linen. A baker opens his shutters, and heat tumbles out. Bread just pulled from the fire, its crust blistered, seeds popping faintly. The smell is thick, comforting. He sees you staring. You again? Me again? You'll dream of this bread. When you leave, he's probably right, the warmth lingers as you keep walking. The city is alive with contradictions. Noise that's quiet, stillness that moves, time that circles rather than marches. The more you notice, the more you wonder if those watchmen, who once sang hours into the dark, weren't marking time. At all but weaving it, making sure the city never unraveled in sleep. And maybe that's why you feel what you feel now. A rhythm beneath your steps, older than drums, softer than flutes. It doesn't tell you the hour. It tells you that hours themselves are echoes. The boy with his ink-stained fingers, the dervish sweeping dust, the porter laughing at your oar, the conqueror whispering poetry, the tulips swaying as if to mock. Greed, all of them still walking beside you. The light is higher now, heat gathering on stone, shadows shrinking into cracks. The day has fully begun, but the echoes remain, stretching beyond morning, beyond centuries. You realize the story hasn't ended at the palace gates or in these quieter streets. It never ends. It only folds back into itself, waiting for the next listener. So you slow your steps. You let the sound of the flute fade, the scent of bread thin into air, the sparkle of blacksmith sparks dissolve. The city exhales, and you finally exhale with it. It's softer now, calmer, like lying back after a long walk, watching the ceiling fan turn. The rhythm is still there, but it doesn't demand. It only rocks gently like waves, like a lullaby. And as your eyes grow heavier, the echoes soften too, not disappearing, just settling, like dust in a shaft of light. So rest now. The watchmen have sung, the city has breathed, the hours have passed. Time itself will keep watch a little longer. Good night, end of script. Sweet dreams.